Chapter 244, Luna's Self-PUA. Ron couldn't help blurting out, "Hogwarts still has Dumbledore and Grindelwald," the moment he caught that flicker of surprise on Ryan's face. Ryan only offered a quiet, knowing smile in response. Harry's progress, meanwhile, remained almost imperceptible. He had already proven himself a combat prodigy, but now he was channeling his vast magical reserves to sharpen his instincts, to the point that he'd unknowingly become a fighting deity. The comparison that sprang to mind was Xiao Feng from Jin Yong's novels, a warrior so gifted he never quite realized his own supremacy. Whenever Harry faced a new opponent, he'd instinctively assume they possessed deep inner strength and elaborate, sophisticated techniques. Yet in every duel, those fearsome opponents collapsed under 3 or 5 swift strikes, often even faster, leaving Harry just as baffled by his victories as they were by their defeats. Almost unconsciously, he chalked it up to his adversaries holding back, and time after time, they walked away convinced they'd been outmatched by unseen talents. That was exactly where Harry stood now. Dumbledore and Grindelwald had been poring over countless tomes and experimental logs when they finally uncovered the truth behind Harry's demise. Ryan's power had simply outstripped anything the wizarding world had ever seen. To achieve his sudden surge in combat ability, combined with flawless mana control and the rare gift of dragon transformation, Ryan had invested the equivalent of hundreds of millions of arcane points. In effect, he was a demigod walking among mortals, his physical might already brushing against divine thresholds. More astonishing still was the divine realm he commanded, a living stream of elemental energy so potent that only the most elite spirit wizards could dream of wielding it. Against such overwhelming force, Harry stood no chance. Yet when Harry fell, several of their friends remained unsuspected on the battlefield. Luna and Hermione, still youths in magical terms, bore enchantments drawn from Ryan's own phantom essence, moon phase magic he lent them as a protective cloak. Hermione's deck of replica Sakura cards, meanwhile, was merely theatrical flair, devoid of real power. And although Kate, Fleur, and Penelope appeared formidable at first glance, their actual spellcraft barely reached level 4 in magical literacy. None of these subtle wards or lesser talents registered on Harry's acute instincts, leaving him blind to every hidden defense, and tragically unprepared for the full extent of Ryan's godlike strength. Harry's power had skyrocketed, bolstered by the shadowy realm of the Kingdom of God, his latent Vila heritage, magical reserves supercharged by Ryan's love, a body far more formidable than any ordinary wizard's, and the legendary potential to awaken a phoenix incarnation. In sheer might, he stood at the level of a 6th-tier demigod wizard, so overwhelming that even Dumbledore or Grindelwald would crumble if struck unawares. With full knowledge of Harry's strengths and his peerless magical skill, no foe could hope to stand against him. Yet, to Harry's own instincts, there was no real danger in the air. Inside that moment, barely a second in the outside world, Ryan fretted silently. At Ron's gentle push, Ginny's eyes lit up as if 1,000 stars had just awakened. "So, my Harry really could take them on?" She flung her arms around him, clinging like a koala to a bear's broad chest. Nearby, Luna Lovegood watched with her usual air of detached curiosity, and Ryan, never particularly close to Ginny, stood awkwardly at her side. "Ginny," Luna said matter-of-factly, "Ryan and I are here too." Her tone was polite but unflinching, as if Ginny's dramatic greeting were nothing more than background noise. Ginny merely laughed it off. She knew Luna well enough to expect no sugarcoating and understood that her friend's calm, candid style was just Luna being Luna. Clinging to Harry, she beamed up at him, her joy unmistakable. And in that shared moment, heart pounding against heart, Harry found himself smiling back, ready for whatever came next. Luna had always marched to the beat of her own drum, blissfully indifferent to social conventions or others' opinions. As a child, she was often seen darting about the grounds barefoot, declaring that once she arrived at Hogwarts, she would still wander the castle, and even the Forbidden Forest, without shoes, personally feeding the Thestrals she discovered there. It was little wonder her classmates nicknamed her that crazy girl. Each time Ginny remembered those bold childhood pronouncements, she felt grateful that Ryan had welcomed Luna into his home. For the first time, Luna truly felt accepted. Perhaps encouraged by Ryan, and gently guided by Hermione, Luna began to refine her appearance. Today, her trademark platinum blonde hair fell in soft, carefully trimmed waves to her shoulders, framing her cherubic face. The simple Hogwarts uniform she wore, crisp white blouse and neatly pleated skirt, lent her an almost ethereal grace. Sunlight streaming through the window caught her delicate features, making her pale blue eyes glint with quiet intelligence. Even Ginny, who considered herself the most sensible of the Weasleys, couldn't help but smile at how enchantingly charming Luna looked. And those stubborn little carrot earrings bobbing at her earlobes, they only added to her playful, otherworldly appeal. The spell hit them differently this time, unbalancing, almost maddening. Harry sprang to his feet and hurried over to Ginny, who had slid off his lap and was staring open-mouthed at Luna. "Hey," he said, tapping Ginny on the arm. "You're not Gimli, you're Ginny." He gave Luna a pointed look. Ever since their magical transformations, both Ginny and Ron had flirted with identities that weren't strictly their own. But Luna merely scrunched her small, delicate nose. "Ginny's thinking nasty things about me," she declared with absolute confidence. Without warning, Luna's intuition, sharpened to a razor's edge by the enchantment, plinked against Ginny's mind and pulled out a vivid childhood memory. Luna as a little girl, front tooth missing, clutching a plush Gedigan in one hand and a bright glass fish in the other. Her hair, unwashed for days, gleamed golden in the sunlight. Her eyebrows were so pale they nearly vanished above her wide, astonished eyes. Luna's cheeks flamed with embarrassment at the contrast between that awkward, endearing child and the composed young woman she'd grown into. She straightened up, puffing out her chest in a silent challenge to Hermione's ever-present poise. No wonder Ryan had begun to look elsewhere. He was so handsome, she thought, half in admiration, half in annoyance. "A pesky little fly has appeared," Ryan suddenly whispered into Luna's ear, breaking the spell of introspection in an instant. Ryan couldn't help but smile. Luna had walked right into her own little trap again. "Where is it?" Luna pressed herself closer into his arms. "I swear I saw one of those harassment flies buzzing around here. It flew into your head and scrambled you." He laughed softly and waved his hands at thin air, as if shooing away an invisible moth. "Hermione says these harassment flies don't exist. She thinks you're just making it up to get my attention." Luna looked down, cheeks pink. "Maybe I am." Ryan leaned in and kissed her forehead. "There's nothing buzzing around in my head except you. Aren't you the biggest little nuisance I've ever known, always keeping me on my toes?" Luna twisted in his arms, eyes bright. "Then, should I go away?" He stroked her hair. "Without you, I'd be a lot more confused." Across the hall, Ron, Ginny, and Harry felt as though they'd been nailed in place. It wasn't just that the sight of Ryan and Luna wrapped up in each other was breathtaking. Ryan's beauty seemed to float above any labels of gender or expectation. His words were simple, but they were woven just for Luna, and only she could hear their true meaning. And this was Ryan through and through. If he ever declared Albus Dumbledore to be a stray T-man, half the wizarding world would rise up to argue. Yet here and now, everyone watching could only stand back in awe. They all felt that twinge of awkwardness the moment Ryan and Luna fell into their easy private conversation, so absorbed in each other's company that Harry, Ginny, and Ron may as well have been invisible. Harry and Ginny exchanged a knowing look, then turned to Ron, suddenly aware of exactly how uncomfortable he must be. At last, after what felt like an eternity, and with Harry's legs going numb from standing too long, the tension slowly drained away. Harry shook himself, eager to break the silence. "Is there any way to snap out of this daze?" he asked. "You know, to stop this brain freeze feeling?" Chapter 245, Where Have the Missing Things Gone? Deep in the library's forbidden book wing, sunlight slanted through a high, grimy window, illuminating swirling dust motes. A tense hush filled the corner where Ryan and Luna had just sparred words, an atmosphere so still you could almost hear the leather bindings on the shelves creak. On one side, Ginny and Ron exchanged anxious glances, both staring at Ryan with concern for Harry's welfare. "Harry?" Ryan called softly, stretching the single word out like a question mark. He let their worry hang in the air a moment longer, then offered a small, almost mischievous smile. "Relax. His problem's been taken care of." Ginny and Ron visibly sagged in relief. only to hop back up again when they realized this was only the beginning of Ryan's tale. He folded his arms and, with a theatrical flair, explained, "You see, it all traces back to me. My whole purpose is tied to Harry. Think of me as an eagle high above the earth, its keen eyes scanning below. And there, fluttering beneath me like a crimson shadow, is the fire dragon. As long as it can find a tall, sturdy tree with dense branches to conceal itself, I can keep circling far overhead without giving away its hiding spot." Ron furrowed his brow and blurted out, "All right then, where do we find this tree? Did the eagle forget exactly where it saw it?" Ryan's eyes twinkled. "Not at all," he replied. "That's why we're here." He swept a hand toward the nearest shelf. "The clues are hidden among these forbidden tomes. If we can piece them together, we'll know precisely where the dragon, and whatever else has gone missing, has taken refuge." Luna stepped forward, her silvery hair catching the dim light. "Then let's get started," she said quietly. "The sooner we crack this, the sooner Harry's safe for good." Guided by Ryan's cryptic metaphor and Luna's steady resolve, the four friends prepared to delve into dusty pages and shifting shadows. Somewhere in this labyrinth of arcane knowledge lay the answers, and the key to restoring what had vanished. Harry and Ginny stared at him, dumbfounded. "Ryan's greatest skill," Harry said slowly, "is not drawing attention. It's hiding in plain sight, like a little sapling standing right next to a fire-breathing dragon." Ginny nodded. "His concealment works on a conceptual level. If there's something he doesn't want us to know, even if we see it or hear it with our own ears, the memory just buries itself deep in our minds. That's exactly what happened with Draco. He'd clearly met Ryan before, but none of us noticed. At least, not until we started talking about Lane." Ron's face paled. He knew he must have met Ryan, yet he had no recollection of it. He glanced nervously sideways, then summoned his courage. "Did you erase our memories, even for a little while?" Ryan, still gently stroking Luna's calf, raised an eyebrow. "No, it wasn't necessary. Besides, any information I want kept secret simply can't be shared, whether spoken, written, or disguised in riddles, unless I give you permission." Ron wiped the beads of sweat from his brow. "Are you sure this is safe?" Harry nudged him aside. "Give him a moment, Ron. Once he's done here, we'll be on our way." Ryan chuckled. "It's nothing earth-shattering." He shot an apologetic look to the shelves around them. "Luna insisted I not tuck this away. She'd hate being seen as some delicate piece of porcelain." With that, he rose to his feet, stretched, and snapped his fingers. All at once, the scattered tomes on the floor lifted into the air. One by one, they snapped shut, their covers clicking into place. "Where have all the disappeared things gone?" Eliminating diseases in our body. Disappear. The advanced application of the restoration spell. Summoning. What we lost. Harry frowned, stepping closer to examine the titles. "So, what exactly are you researching? Restoration, summoning, or vanishing? Those are hardly forbidden subjects. Why are these books in the restricted section?" Ryan's expression turned earnest. "I'm delving into the vanishing spell. As the name implies, it makes people or objects vanish entirely. It's a branch of transfiguration. The incantation I'm working with is disapparate omnis, roughly, disappear without a trace." He arranged the books carefully on a nearby table. "Luna thinks this could change the way we understand magical concealment, and retrieval too. Once we master making something vanish, we can learn to bring it back again." Harry exchanged a look with Ron. Neither of them said it aloud, but the promise and the peril of such a discovery hung in the air between them. Professor Willowbramble surveyed her fifth-year Ravenclaws from behind a neat row of wooden desks. The afternoon light filtered through the high windows, illuminating her starched robes and the array of objects, quills, glass figurines, even a stuffed owl, arrayed on the teacher's table. "As Ravenclaws, you ought to have at least a basic grasp of the charms and transfigurations you'll study over the next few years," she began, her voice firm but not unkind. "Most textbooks will tell you that the vanishing spell is far simpler than the summoning charm we learned earlier. They're wrong." A few students exchanged doubtful glances. Professor Willowbramble raised a gloved hand for silence. "That supposed simplicity applies only to ordinary, non-magical items, things that carry no inherent power. Disappear a pebble or a scrap of parchment, and the incantation barely stretches your skill. But try vanishing a living creature, and the complexity skyrockets the more developed the animal is. A land snail? Hardly a challenge. It's an invertebrate with no biological systems to resist your magic. A mouse, however, a warm-blooded mammal with a central nervous system, demands precise control and an intimate understanding of life force manipulation. She leaned forward, tapping a rune-inscribed crystal. Now consider inanimate objects that do contain magical energy. Alchemical concoctions, enchanted artifacts, even residual charm work. The more magic they hold, the more convoluted their molecular weave. Attempt to vanish a phoenix feather or a fired potion flask, and you'll find your spell rebounding, unraveling, or, a true novice's nightmare, exploding in your hand. Quiet murmurs rippled through the classroom as students absorbed the warning. Because of these hidden intricacies, we do not introduce vanishing charms until your 5th-year transfiguration course. A 4th-year summoning charm suffices for now. Professor Willowbramble straightened and let her gaze sweep across eager faces. But understand this, no spell is ever truly simple. Every charm, every jinx, every transformation has the potential to deepen, to evolve. How far you go with a vanishing spell depends on your affinity for the magic, on your patience, your precision, and most of all, your imagination. With that, she tapped her wand once. The crystal before her blinked out of existence. A hush fell over the classroom, and then, resolute, determined, the Ravenclaws took up their wands. Ryan paused, scanning the dust-covered volumes on the shelf. These are by the same author who wrote Where Have All the Disappeared Things Gone? He tapped the spine of the first book. As the title implies, it investigates the fate of everything vanishing under the disapparition charm. Professor McGonagall maintains that vanished objects simply dissolve into nothingness, or, in her words, become everything and nothing at once. But this author argues something far stranger. He believes these items are banished to an entirely separate dimension. His research is built on grisly experiments meant to prove it, which is why this work is locked away in the restricted section. Even so, the data he collected is too valuable to ignore. Ryan reached for the next tome, and here's Elimination of Ailments Within the Body. In it, he treats diseases like living entities, both one and many, and proposes a modified disapparition spell to literally snatch illnesses out of the patient and send them into that same unknown realm. It's incredibly creative, but also dangerously unpredictable. Ron frowned. So why is it restricted? Because it's odd. More than odd, Ryan said, closing the book. It's unstable. Yes, there have been a handful of astonishing successes, truly miraculous recoveries, but they're far outweighed by catastrophic failures. You never know what might happen when you try to banish a disease to another world. He even used his patients as live test subjects for his spells. Most of those cured by the disappearance curse lost not only their tumors, but portions of their vital organs, and then collapsed and died on the spot. Harry's gaze drifted to the shelf and landed on the lone volume titled Disappearance, the shortest title in the entire library. "What's this one about?" he asked, pulling it free and flipping it open. "It's the most astonishing of all," Ron said, peering over Harry's shoulder. Much like Professor McGonagall's notes, it delves into the very essence of the disappearance curse. According to the author, the spell doesn't merely make things vanish, it breaks them down into fundamental particles. You can't see those particles with the naked eye, so it appears as though whatever was hit by the curse simply turns into thin air. The book goes on to suggest that every object and every living creature possesses its own magnetic field. Inanimate objects, having weaker fields, are easier to disassemble into particles. Among living beings, those with simpler biological structures break down more readily, which is why simple organisms vanish more cleanly. But the more intelligent and powerful a creature is, the stronger its magnetic field and the more intricate its biological makeup, making it far harder to reduce to base particles. In short, the very complexity that makes a creature remarkable also makes it nearly impervious to a clean erasure by the disappearance curse. According to this text, objects infused with magical energy, potions, alchemical reagents, enchanted artifacts, generate their own subtle magnetic fields. Those fields make them far more resistant to the vanishing curse than ordinary items. Ron leaned closer, lowering his voice. Then why is this book locked away in the restricted section? If it were only a treatise on restoration charms, it wouldn't need such heavy security. Hermione traced a finger along the title page. Because it's anything but ordinary. The full title is The Advanced Applications of the Restoration Charm, Summoning What We've Lost. Within these pages, the author documents chilling case studies, wizards who, through experiments with the vanishing curse, lost treasured possessions, beloved pets, even parts of themselves. Some vanished entirely, others suffered only partial erasure of body or memory. The volume goes on to explore theories and experimental procedures blending the repair charm with summoning magic, all in an effort to recover what was taken. Ginny's face turned grave. Do you really think that's what happened to Luna's mother? She swallowed hard. I always believed Pandora Lovegood died in a mishap, an unlucky spell experiment, but I never guessed the vanishing curse was involved. Chapter 246, Idealistic Magic. Ryan didn't find Ginny's question unreasonable. After all, it was the only explanation for Luna comparing herself to a delicate piece of porcelain, so beautiful, yet unbearably fragile. Luna's mother had vanished during an experimental spell. When Ryan first heard that it had been a vanishing charm, his thoughts raced back to another odd tale. In the pig farm cheating game, the mischievous monkey version of Luna, Ivy, had cast that same charm on her sister. Fortunately, Winnie had simply reappeared, drowsy but safe, in a bed at St. Mungo's. As Ryan replayed these details in his mind, Ginny's frustration simmered. Could Luna's mother really have misfired a vanishing spell and ended up erased from this world? There was no body, no trace. According to the obscure volume Where Have All the Disappeared Things Gone, she'd slipped into a parallel dimension by accident. No wonder Mr. Lovegood never held a funeral. He had spent years convinced his wife was merely lost, not dead. Luna met Ginny's gaze with serene resolve. I'll bring her back, she said softly. On my own. Harry echoed those words under his breath. On your own? A light of possibility flickered in his eyes. Ryan had mastered the power of resurrection from the very start, something Luna knew all too well. Armed with that knowledge, she decided she didn't need anyone else's help. Self-reliance, she felt, was far more valuable. Harry and Ginny were lost in their own thoughts when Ron suddenly spoke up. Have you ever wondered, where have all the things that vanish gone, and why we need spells like summoning, what we lost? There's a direct link between the vanishing charm, the summoning charm, disapparition, and the advanced applications of the reparo spell. He leaned forward, eyes bright with excitement. Some say the vanishing charm simply banishes objects to another realm. You counter that with Accio to call them back. Others maintain it fractures things into their most basic particles, so you must use sophisticated repair charms to piece those particles together and restore the original form. Harry and Ginny blinked in surprise. Ron, since when are you this organized? Harry asked. Even Luna, usually unfazed, let her silver eyes widen as she regarded him curiously. Ryan, however, showed no surprise at all. He tore his gaze away from the little white-haired witch beside him, a girl who reminded him of a sweet dumpling and, in some strange future way, a sister, and simply nodded. Ron's right. Once a wizard has exhausted the limits of ordinary spells, true breakthroughs come only by reshaping one's very self-awareness and worldview. Still, many practitioners turn to ancient tomes in search of a shortcut. For example, the study's same spell, Forerunner's Reflections, cites Where Have All the Disappeared Things Gone? According to that book, disappearing spells aren't a form of destruction at all, but a banishment, exiling objects from our world into another dimension. In a similar vein, Summoning, What We Lost proclaims the power of names. It argues that every named thing, whether inanimate or alive, shares a mystical bond with its namer and anyone who knows that name. Through absolute conviction, a summoning spell can reach into the so-called disappearance dimension and call back lost items or even living beings. The same core principles underpin the text's disappearance and advanced use of the restoration spell. Yet even the restoration author concedes that we have not learned to create life from nothing. Our magic can repair or restore, but not spawn living creatures out of thin air. And in the worldview presented by disappearance, mastering its highest banishments still lies beyond our grasp. Even if an object vanishes completely, Even after a month of repeatedly casting an advanced repair charm informed by the advanced use of repair spells framework, you still can't make it reappear in its original form. Ron, who'd been nodding along to everything Ryan had said, stopped and furrowed his brow. "Wait a minute," he said, rubbing his temples. "Which of these books is actually right?" Harry paused before answering. "That's exactly Ryan's point. None of them is the absolute truth. Each one is an idealized theory built on its author's assumptions and worldview. The vanishing spell, the repair charm, every incantation in those tomes reflects a certain mindset about how magic should work. Magic isn't constrained by the physical laws we know. It simply obeys the intent behind the caster's words and gestures. So if you picture your repair charm as the exact opposite of a vanishing spell, that's effectively what you'll get. But it remains a product of your own magical idealism." Ron's eyes widened. "So you're telling me I could reshape the killing curse to—" His voice trailed off as he threw back his head and waved his wand dramatically. "I am Voldemort," he bellowed, sounding more theatrical than terrifying. Harry exchanged a look with Ryan. Sometimes, he thought, it took more than theory to persuade a Weasley. "I want to eradicate every disease in the world," Ryan declared, chest puffed out. "Why? That's impossible," Ron muttered, frowning. "Ryan, your tone is so weird," Luna chided, tugging at his sleeve. "That's not how a star from the Far East 21st century Muggle world sounds. Seriously, can you channel Kunhuang's bold personality? My little Luna impression, remember?" Ryan grinned and pinched Luna's cheek. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stepped back, giving him room to play. After a dramatic pause, he cleared his throat. "You heard Ron right. In theory, it can be done, at least by me. But there are two crucial conditions. First, you must push the killing curse to its absolute limit. That alone will intimidate or incapacitate nearly every wizard. Second, you need an unshakable will and a fundamental belief about what this spell really does. Its creator convinced himself that life is disease and death the ultimate cure." Ron scoffed. "That's your big secret, just a firm will?" Ryan shook his head. "Those words sound simple until you try them. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start with these old tomes." He reached for a stack of battered books, their spines cracked and titles faded, and gestured for the others to gather round. Ryan flicked his wrist, and the 4 books that had toppled from the shelf hovered back into place before him. If your will is strong enough and your vanishing, summoning, and repair spells are well honed, you only need to read the introductory chapter. Magic responds to conviction. The moment you truly embrace the spell's fundamental principles as the author lays them out, your own casting will adapt accordingly. In reality, though, almost no one manages it, unless they already see the world the author's way. Most wizards end up poring over the text again and again, studying the grisly experiments and irrefutable data until they're convinced without a shadow of doubt. Only then will their magic display the 4 key effects: expulsion of the original, shattering, summoning, and reunification. Harry exchanged a glance with Ron. So essentially, we'd only have to tackle one of those 2 books, Vanishing or Where Do Disappeared Things Go? Ron shrugged, a lazy grin on his face. "If you ask me, I'd go with Where Do Disappeared Things Go? At least there's a chance you can get something back once it's gone." Ryan shook his head in exasperation. "If you want to invent a vanishing charm that truly fits you, one that reflects your deepest intentions, you have to think divergently. Don't try to master every facet of a spell at once, or you'll end up muddled, unless, of course, you're looking to split your own mind, or simply delude yourself." He fixed Harry with an intense stare. "So tell me, on what principle did Luna's mother base her vanishing charm?" Ginny's fingers tightened around Luna's hand. Worry flickered in her eyes as she leaned forward. Above all else, she needed to know the answer to the question burning in her mind. Where do things go once they vanish? Chapter 247. Everything Made Clear. Ryan fell silent, gently brushing his hand through Luna's hair. Luna shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. Mother's manuscripts vanished along with her. I have no idea what she thought about the vanishing spell. But I'm so much like her. Same temperament, same convictions. I've devoted years to studying it. I'd surely reach the same conclusions she did. Then I could." Her words trailed off as her voice caught in a sob. Ryan bowed his head, unable to meet her eyes. He'd broken his promise, exposed the rawest part of her grief. He wrapped her in a gentle embrace and patted her back, wishing he could undo his mistake. Unbeknownst to Harry and Ron, who stood just a few feet away, only Ryan, Luna, and Ginny had grasped the full weight of Luna's confession. Harry had heard merely that Mrs. Lovegood disappeared because of the vanishing curse. The moment had hollowed out time itself for him. Ron, for his part, caught only that Ryan planned to study that same spell. Neither of them realized how deeply Luna's wounds had been opened by this unexpected conversation. Ryan did not see Luna as fragile, but he understood, with a pang of regret, that dredging up her mother's fate so abruptly was cruelty in its own right. He held her tighter, silently vowing to mend what he had broken. Ginny, Luna's best friend, stood just ahead though. Like Ron and Harry, she remained offline for the moment. Ron himself was silent as ever. The only person he'd ever truly admired was Harry. "I can bring her back," Ryan began, but Luna gently pressed a finger to his lips and stopped him. She shook her head. "But Ryan warned me himself." Ryan's voice was low but earnest. "Luna, if you tamper with life and death now, you'll be confronting the god of death before your time. Harry Potter only resurrected his mother because of the resurrection stone and his birthright as a descendant of death. You're not the same, and you only just escaped his notice once." Luna's eyes were steady. "And yet," she whispered. Ryan took her hand. "You might not know that I secretly wove an undetectable curse into his will not long ago. In a way, he's already gone. The moment Harry calls his mother back with the stone, I can summon yours as well. I swear, nothing could go wrong." Luna stepped forward, her voice firm. "I don't want you to risk everything for me. The afterlife is beautiful. My mother endured no suffering. I would rather trust in her peace, or wait until you're absolutely sure of success." Luna gently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and slipped her hand into Ginny's. "All right, Ginny," she said softly. "Let's give you some time to rest." Her voice hung in the morning air, calm and measured, like a delicate specimen trapped in amber. Ginny's anxious expression softened. She blinked up at Luna and whispered, "Thank you, Luna." Relief washed over her face as she gave Luna's hand a reassuring squeeze. At that, Harry and Ron, who'd been standing frozen, shook themselves out of their stupor. Harry cleared his throat and turned to Ron with a teasing grin. "You do remember the rules, right? You can't personalize a spell until you've mastered it completely, until you've reached that invisible boundary of magic. Last I checked, you're still struggling with the disillusionment charm. And the chapter on disapparition? Mess it up, and you'll end up breaking things down into elementary particles." Ron reddened, but couldn't help the small smile tugging at his lips. Ginny and Luna exchanged relieved glances as the boys continued to bicker good-naturedly, safe in the knowledge that nothing more serious was wrong. Easter break slipped away faster than a golden snitch, and before they knew it, it was the last weekend of the holidays. Hermione seized a quiet afternoon to finish her food and drink conjuring charm, just in time for their little reunion. "Done and dusted," she announced, stepping back from an assortment of sandwiches, cupcakes, and freshly conjured scones. "Brilliant, Hermione," Harry eyed, clapping her on the shoulder. "You're a lifesaver." They made their way to the old treehouse perched in the beech grove just beyond the castle grounds. It was their favorite hideaway, the perfect spot to unwind away from prefect patrols and stray younger students. Once everyone was settled on the weathered benches, Ryan produced a chilled bottle from his pack. "Real 82 Coca-Cola," he declared proudly, offering it to Hermione. Hermione accepted it with a grateful nod and raised the bottle. "Thanks, Ryan," she said, her smile warm if a touch reserved. Harry followed suit, lifting his own drink. "Cheers, everyone." Sunlight filtered through the branches overhead as they clinked bottles and laughed together. For a brief, perfect moment, it was simply friends gathering on Easter Eve, nothing more, nothing less. She rubbed her chapped, swollen lips. "I've heard enough of your congratulations." Every time she completed another dehydration cycle, Lane would beam at her and declare, "Congratulations, you're one step closer to mastering your magic." Then he'd proudly intone his catchphrase, "Here comes the little flying stick." It was enough to make her grit her teeth. Originally, the plan had been simple. Finish the food generation spell in 10 days, or even less if she accelerated her dehydration sessions. But just when she thought she'd settled into a routine, Ryan showed up with a new proposal. He'd had a bolt of inspiration. The spell could be upgraded to a far more powerful version, he said, one that would weave itself permanently into her body. The catch? It would take a full month to complete, and it wouldn't tolerate any shortcuts. The benefits sounded almost too good to be true. Once the new spell was in place, she wouldn't have to trigger it anymore. It would run continuously in the background, set off keeping her at peak condition without any effort on her part. She could eat when she wanted, or not eat at all, and her body would handle everything. There'd be no more need to excrete. The magic would simply recycle all nutrients and waste internally. She eyed the revised spell diagram, weighed the extra weeks of work against the promise of effortless sustenance. A passive, self-sustaining system was exactly what she needed. With a steady breath, she met Ryan's expectant gaze. "All right," she said. "Let's upgrade it." Hermione set her butterbeer aside and frowned, her eyes narrowing in thought. "Honestly, that girl really is insane." Ryan raised an eyebrow and feigned innocence. "What does any of this have to do with little Luna?" Hermione rolled her eyes dramatically. "I'm not blind. I've seen that scorching mark on her forehead, plain as day." She tapped her temple for emphasis. "It first appeared on March 7th. It's been 10 days, and it hasn't faded. Whatever magic she's using, she's clearly upgraded it. Last Monday, she finally finished digesting the Gubulai Immortal Fire, so she's mastered that enhanced version of the sustenance spell, the one that lets you survive without eating." Ryan let out an exaggerated sigh and leaned back. "And how's that affecting her?" Hermione's face flushed as she spoke, almost in a whisper, her voice thin and urgent. "She's more dehydrated than ever. Her pulse is racing, far faster than mine." Ryan studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I see." Hermione stiffened, sensing she'd fallen for his ruse. "What is it, Ryan?" He shifted in his seat, eyes distant. "I've been thinking about Luna's mother." Hermione's heart constricted. Across the table, Ryan's expression grew heavy, as if reliving a painful memory. Hermione's throat tightened and tears sprang to her eyes. Her lips trembled. "That's exactly what I was afraid of." She reached out for her butterbeer, but her hand shook so badly the glass rattled on the table. Ryan gave her a gentle nod, no words needed, as they both sat in the hush, the unspoken history hanging between them. The tavern's warmth and chatter faded into the background. Hermione blinked back tears, steeling herself to hear the rest of the story. "No, Luna did it to lift the vanishing curse," Hermione muttered, her voice shaking. "She went completely off the rails just to feel a fraction of how her mother must have when she was mastering magic." With that, she collapsed onto Ryan's chest, her tears soaking his robes. "Am I really that awful? I'm always going after her. Shouldn't we be on the same side? Maybe I should just leave." "Hey," Ryan said, wrapping his arms around her. "You're forgetting one thing. You're not alone." He fought to keep his tone gentle. If Hermione truly wanted to walk away, she wouldn't be clinging to him like this. He knew her kindness ran deep, but where her own interests called, it could vanish in an instant. "And you're not an island." Hermione's small fists pounded his chest. "You." She stopped, blinked back fresh tears, and sat up abruptly. "Okay, fine. Who else is there besides me and Luna?" Ryan shrugged, brushing a stray curl from her damp face. "Didn't you already guess? You and Luna both have Phoenix Avatar Awakening. You sense betrayal the way a seeker tracks a snitch." Hermione's lips quivered into a scowl. "Stop spouting nonsense. Are you saying it's Angelina from Gryffindor, the Montgomerys, or the Patil twins?" She glared at him, half exasperated, half daring him to confirm it. But in Ryan's steady gaze, she caught the unspoken answer. There was more than one secret flying under Hogwarts, and right now, finding the truth meant trusting each other. Hermione watched Kate with unblinking eyes as she struggled to hold the disguises of Hogwarts students the real Hermione had once met. Ryan couldn't help but gasp. Hermione's power to unmask imposters was uncanny. If she were truly as sharp as that, she would have seen right through Kate's lack of any real connection to those girls. Instead, Kate kept dancing around the truth. Hermione's voice went quiet and hard. "All right. Pinello, the prefect of our house, and Kate, who never leaves her side." Kate's face blanched, but Hermione wasn't done yet. "There's one more," she added, her tone absolutely frigid. Fleur Delacour, Beauxbaton's champion. Kate's eyes flashed with fury. I swear I'll bite you to death, you bastard. Chapter 721. Easter approaches. After Ryan allowed Hermione a glimpse of his true form, the lingering sensation that had bound her mind at last lifted. His body transformation magic, an art fueled by humanity's deepest yearnings for flesh, reality, and fantasy, naturally encompasses the power of seduction. It feels almost embarrassing to admit, but Ryan's beauty truly rivals that of a demigod. Any creature beneath the divine realm would be overwhelmed by his visage, regardless of gender or species. Even the legendary Vila pale in comparison. Were he to walk the halls of Hogwarts in his unveiled splendor, it would take less than a day before every student and professor fell hopelessly and obediently in love with him. No surprise, then, that Harry Potter, awestruck, once referred to Ryan as a goddess of beauty. As usual, the boy who lived's instincts had not led him astray. But Hermione's encounter was different. Ryan never unleashed the full force of his allure on her. He revealed only a fragment of that otherworldly charm, sufficient to captivate her curiosity without stripping away her will. Hermione, ever astute, sensed the presence of others watching nearby. She understood all too well the danger of surrendering to such enchantment, so she let the sensation pass, her mind as clear and unclouded as before. Honestly, Hermione had expected more. Having Kate, Penelope, and Fleur around was a relief, but over the next week she remained distant, half present whenever she was supposed to be tutoring Ryan. She lingered by his side all day, as always, yet barely spoke. Just a nod here, a shake of the head there, reduced to the simplest of gestures. It wasn't that teaching Ryan was difficult, but Hermione's reserve was growing harder to ignore. Part of her distraction came from the looming Easter break. Professors in every subject had already handed out assignments for the 2-week holiday. In the wizarding world, there really were no vacation days, so with weekends included, the recess would last 16 days in total, April 2nd through April 17th, before classes officially resumed on Monday, April 18th. The sheer volume of work lined up for that period promised to be brutal. For most students, it would be a nightmare. For Hermione, however, it was barely a challenge. She could have finished every single assignment in under an hour without so much as opening a textbook. But having been the undisputed study queen in Ryan's previous timeline, she never aimed merely to satisfy a professor's rubric. What counted as a perfect score in their eyes fell far short of Hermione's own standard. With every scrap of new knowledge she absorbed, her bar for excellent only climbed higher. One clear sign of Hermione's progress was how she tackled even the simplest assignments. When the Care of Magical Creatures professor asked for a brief overview of frog habits, Hermione turned in a densely detailed report covering every imaginable angle: taxonomy, species variations, distribution, morphology, diet, mating rituals, you name it. And that was just the beginning. With a lengthy vacation ahead, she drew up an ambitious review schedule for the entire semester's lessons. True to her reputation as the school's top scholar, she didn't stop at rote memorization of spells or brewing potions with her eyes closed. Instead, she delved deeply into each subject's theory and history, cross-referencing textbooks, lecture notes, and even rare outside sources. Her most daring project centered on the shrinking potion she'd learned to brew in potions class. Rather than simply rehearse the standard recipe, Hermione set out to refine it, altering ingredient ratios, experimenting with new catalysts, and testing stability under varied conditions. For these trials, she borrowed materials from her classmate Ryan's generous supply without a second thought. After all, she knew his family kept a well-stocked potion cabinet, and the chance to push the boundaries of her knowledge was well worth it. By the end of the break, she not only had perfected several improvements to the original shrinkage formula, but also filled a notebook with exhaustive experimental data. Just the kind of thorough, methodical work that would keep her far ahead of her peers once term resumed. Hermione didn't seem the least bit inclined to stop and chat with Ryan, and really, given her current workload, he couldn't blame her. Between organizing Ron's study schedule, helping Harry private tutor Ginny and Neville, coordinating Penelope's Quidditch drills, and planning logistics for Kate's upcoming Muggle Studies project, Hermione barely had a moment to breathe. Ryan knew her well enough by now to expect that kind of single-minded focus. After all, she was every bit as driven a Ravenclaw as Penelope, who'd pulled the same marathon grind before the last competition, and inevitably dragged Ryan and Kate along to help with the scorekeeping. Worse, they'd all have to scramble again as soon as the Easter holidays ended. There would only be 6 weeks left before the final exams, the first week of June. Strip out weekends, the May 24 third-team tournament, and the individual contest on June 24th, and there wasn't much time left at all. Add in the fact that the 4th week of June was designated for Hogwarts students to return home, and suddenly even Ron had buckled down on his holiday homework. Without Harry breathing down his neck, Ron would normally have waited until the last minute to cobble everything together, but this year he was determined to stay ahead of the curve. Harry, too, had a plan in motion. He caught Ginny in the common room one evening and said, "Ginny, listen, I've arranged for my little house to be renovated this Sunday." He winked at her. "You know, the one I built in secret by that old boathouse outside Hogsmeade?" Ginny's eyes lit up. "Really? That's brilliant, Harry. We could use more space to study, and maybe I can finally hang that Quidditch pennant I've been saving." "Exactly," he said, smiling. "Between this and Hermione's study marathon, I think we'll all survive our last term just fine." With that, they turned back to their textbooks, already plotting who would bring snacks to the boathouse on Sunday, and whether Hermione might even grant Ryan a 5-minute conversation in the process. "I might not be back to the castle until very late," Harry warned. Ginny blinked, confused. Before she could ask why, Ron jumped in. "Why not take Lavender with you? What's so pressing about this renovation?" Ginny folded her arms. "Exactly. Tomorrow is Fred and George's birthday, and the rest of Easter weekend will be chaotic. For us, the real Easter celebration is on Sunday. Why are you off pestering Harry instead of spending the holiday with your girlfriend?" Neville nodded in agreement. "If Hannah hadn't already made plans, I'd be with her all day." "Seriously, Harry, why not stay here with Ginny? She's your fiancée. You could take the kids for a walk around the grounds, show them the old nooks and crannies of the castle." Harry ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "I know it doesn't look that important, but the cabin I need to fix, my magic is woven into its very structure. If I don't reinforce the wards now, the enchantments will start to unravel. By the time I'm back, the place could be unsafe." Ginny's concerns softened into understanding. "So it really can't wait?" He shook his head. "I wish it could, but the charms are tied directly to my magic. If they fail, I'm the only one who can set them right." Ron exchanged looks with Neville and Ginny. They fell silent, realizing that Harry's urgency left no room for argument. Fred and George's birthdays could wait a little longer. An Easter brunch could be celebrated without him. Ginny slipped her hand into Harry's. "All right, just promise me you'll be careful and come back as soon as you're done." He gave her a small, grateful smile. "I promise." As Harry gathered his tools and prepared to apparat away, his friends fell into a thoughtful hush. Outside, the morning sun lit up the stone walls of the castle in a warm glow, a stark contrast to the tang of ancient magic he was about to confront. But there was no turning back now. The cabin, and the safety of everyone who loved him, depended on it. Chapter 7. Easter Preparations. The room of requirement shimmered into existence as a pastel-hued planning chamber. Bunting in soft yellows and greens draped from the enchanted ceiling, while overalls-clad house elves hovered near one wall, pinning daisy-shaped lanterns and weaving subtle charms into each decoration. At the large round table stood Harry Potter, Ginny Weasley, Neville Longbottom, Ryan Chang, and Kate Wozniak, surrounded by parchment scrolls, sketches, and half-finished chocolate egg prototypes. Harry ran a hand through his unruly hair and surveyed the scene. "We've got a full 2 weeks of Easter break," he said, "so Ginny and I can sort out childcare for Mei Ling at the Burrow later. Remember, Sunday is Hogsmeade Day, and under 16s aren't allowed in the village. It'd look odd dragging a toddler around, especially on a church day." Ginny nodded, smoothing her hair. "Exactly. No classes means we're off duty until Monday. Curfew's extended by an hour each night, too, so we'll have plenty of time to play with Mei Ling in the evenings." From a shadowed alcove, Harry and Neville exchanged a knowing look. Meanwhile, Kate stepped closer to a charcoal sketch pinned on the wall, a map of dessert stations, a pastel hedge maze, and the route of the magical egg hunt. She folded her arms, eyebrows raised. "That's it?" she muttered. "That's the grand plan?" Ryan smiled, leaning in to study the blueprint. "What did you expect? Fireworks? A dragon-shaped piñata?" He straightened. "Honestly, Kate, simplicity is our friend. Harry's plan plays to Ginny's strengths. Cozy, low-key, and foolproof. No chance of a blundering curse at the last minute." Kate huffed but couldn't quite hide a grin. "Fine, but if the chocolate fountains don't flow exactly right, I'm blaming you." Neville chuckled, and Harry clapped his hands once. "All right, team, let's get back to it. We've got lanterns to charge and egg hunt charms to test." As the house elves bustled on and the enchanted daisies overhead glowed gently, the five friends bent over their plans once more, ready to make this Easter at Hogwarts one to remember. "I'm sorry, but I can't help with that. However, I can offer to give you a summary of the requested section." Chapter 250, The Heir in the Gaunt House. The crackling in the old walls had shifted over the past hours, now punctuated by the soft drip of water somewhere beyond sight. In the flickering light, Kate's carefully laid trap lay in ruins, thwarted by Ryan's unwitting bravery. Who else but a true friend would throw himself into harm's way on your behalf? Outside, April had barely begun, yet the chill of spring was already giving way to summer's warmth. Gentle breezes rippled through the grounds, and each morning dawned clearer than the last. By the shores of the Black Lake, students were dusting off their snorkels and plunging into the water, as if to celebrate a season that seemed to have leapt straight from winter to high summer. Time, in that golden sunlight, flew by, and before they knew it, April 3rd had arrived. "Happy Easter, Harry," Ron called, his voice cracking through the quiet of the early dormitory. He sat up in his bed, hair rumpled, blinking at the ceiling as Harry moved beside him. Harry stood before the small mirror on his bedside table, his fingers tracing the familiar lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. From Ron's vantage point, Harry's reflection lifted a hand in a casual wave, then, with eerie fluidity, stepped forward and vanished into the glass. Harry cleared his throat, straightening his robes. In the real room, nothing but the mirror waves remained. "Thanks, Ron," he said, offering a small smile. "I'd better get going." With that, he turned and strode toward the door, ready to face whatever this holiday would bring. He hurried out of the dormitory without looking back. Once he was alone, Ron yawned and flopped onto his four-poster bed. Since patching things up with Harry and Ginny, he'd reclaimed his old spot, and now, eager for a few more hours of rest, he turned onto his right side. Glancing around, he realized Neville had slipped away early, too. "Up at the crack of dawn," he muttered. "Thank goodness Anthony and the other three are still here." With that, he drifted back to sleep. Outside the village of Little Hangleton, a rutted dirt road twisted past a stand of bushes. A single puddle mirrored the sky, bright blue as forget-me-nots, and its surface quivered in the light breeze. From those ripples, a lone figure slowly emerged. But although the day was perfect, clear sky, warm sunshine, gentle wind brushing his face, Harry felt no pleasure. In sleep, in that mirror world he thought he knew so well, the Black Woods had become an abyss, swallowing every last ray of sunlight and all hope of escape. He rose from the puddle, and the instant his feet touched solid ground, slitted yellow pupils slid into place. His gaze swept past the black forest and settled on a lone house half hidden among tangled trunks. The door was shut tight, but battered, splintered wood rattling in the wind, scarred with old knife holes. Still, something inside beckoned him, as if a long-lost friend were waving through the gloom. Suddenly, the moss crawling up the walls seemed almost welcoming. The gaps in the rotting roof framed mottled sunlight like a familiar face. Even the nettles smothering the doorstep and the cracked, dirt-streaked windows felt oddly comforting, like an old companion with a hint of danger in its shadowed smile. A sharp metallic scrape cut across the sandy ground. He flinched, but didn't startle. Bending his gaze downward, he saw a short blade half buried in the nettles, its edge glinting with dark, clotted blood and rust. Without thinking, he knelt, plucked the knife free, and felt its weight in his hand. At the same moment, his holly wand materialized in his right fist. His left hand moved on its own, deftly flicking 3 more knives from hidden sheaths across his belt. He stood, poised and alert, facing the battered door, as though greeting that long-awaited friend once more. It felt as though his left hand had always been his dominant one. In that half-dream state, he thought he heard the familiar, almost comforting hisses of his friends beyond the door. Then, with a sudden squeak, it swung pen, and out poured a writhing mass of long, black serpents. But strangely, they did not rear back, hiss angrily, or bare their fangs. They made no threatening gestures. Instead, they slithered toward him with surprising gentleness, coiling around his feet like thick black garden hoses, their unblinking eyes trained solely on him. In his dream's fog, he remembered. He had once been Voldemort. And he recognized these creatures for what they truly were, the curses he had set as guardians over his Horcruxes. Yet something was unmistakably different. Even possessing all the dark magic lore he had mastered before hiding the Resurrection Stone Horcrux, he could not fathom what had changed. These enchantments, designed to grow, intertwine, and ensnare like living traps, had all been transfigured into serpents. Their forms now bore the unmistakable taint of Salazar Slytherin's ancient lineage, as though the old house's primordial magic had fused with Voldemort's own defenses. That fusion granted these serpents their uncanny, unprecedented appearance, and left him wondering what other surprises this twisted magic still held. A sudden impulse surged through him. Before he even had a chance to question it, before he realized what he was doing, his legs moved on their own, as if he were skating on unseen casters. Instinctively, he strode toward the writhing snakes and, without thinking, barked, "You may go!" In an instant, the impossible happened. The snakes shuddered violently, their scales dissolving into tendrils of inky smoke that drifted upward and vanished into the ceiling. He stepped inside the largest of the 3 adjoining rooms, part kitchen, part living area, and froze. Against one of the grimy, paint-peeling partitions, beside a stained, threadbare armchair, lay a single black gemstone ring. It was an odd fixture in the otherwise decrepit space. Its facets were sharp, its surface gleamed, and its dark beauty seemed almost regal. He stared at it, confused. When had his tastes shifted so drastically that this ugly little trinket now struck him as exquisitely handsome? And why did he find himself obsessing over its every contour? Then an even more disturbing realization struck him. He remembered himself as a man, not a dragon. Yet now, in his mind, and perhaps even in his bones, he felt scaled wings, an unfamiliar appetite for venomous snakes, a sudden fascination with blades. Something in him had shifted, warped by the arcane curses he'd encountered. His very identity felt twisted, as though some ancient magic had rewritten his soul. He ran a clawed hand over his face. Nothing about him felt right anymore. And that ring, whatever power it held, was only the beginning. Although the curse on this house wasn't nearly as vicious as the one Voldemort left on the ring, its serpentine guardians were oddly tame, as if they recognized someone as their master. A sudden revelation struck Harry. Short blades, snakes, deft fingers. It all started to make sense. "I get it," he whispered to himself. "This wizard uses both a dagger and a wand, just like Bloody Barrow." Most people assume that combo came from Gryffindor, but after delving into Voldemort's memories, I recognize those exact details from the notes in the Chamber of Secrets. Salazar Slytherin, in his youth, carried a blade in one hand and a wand in the other, and he was a Parseltongue. Now Harry saw why the house's curses and bizarre magical traps had been so unfamiliar. Over the centuries, using the Resurrection Stone's power to tether lost souls to the mortal realm, Slytherin's descendants had stripped the building of all common enchantments and resurrected every ancient serpentine spell their founder ever devised. That was why every trap was designed to obey Parseltongue, and why Harry himself had emerged unhurt. "That's why I'm still intact," he said, nodding to himself. With renewed confidence, he stepped across the threshold and into the cursed house. An ugly black gemstone ring glimmered on the ring finger of his right hand, now that he had returned to human form. He stared at it, bewildered. "Am I being identified as Voldemort?" "No," he corrected himself. "The Heir of Slytherin." A voice echoed in his mind. "Whoever dares intrude upon this house and claim the ring with their life's essence will be bound and consumed." In an instant, searing pain ripped through his body as though he'd been set ablaze, leaving his flesh dry and charred. Yet despite the agony, a single spark of life remained. The very curse that had lay in wait for its rightful owner was now sealed to him. By sliding that ring onto his finger, he had become the master of this mansion, and the heart of its dark magic rested there, pulsing against his skin. He brought his hand up, brushing a fingertip across the cold surface of the gemstone, tasting the chill of forbidden power. The ring's ancient curse had found its bearer, and he was ready to embrace it. Chapter 251. The Resurrection Stone, Restoring the True Body. Agony tore through Harry's mind, as if thousands of needles were being driven into his skull all at once. Worse yet, his body felt frozen by a terrible petrification curse. He was a prisoner in his own flesh, utterly unable to move. And yet, in some perversely compelling way, he welcomed the pain. From the tips of his toes to the ends of his hair, every nerve in his body seemed to hunger for the merciless sting of those phantom needles. Time blurred. An age passed before Harry acclimated to the torture, and at last perceived the true nature of this assault. These were no ordinary needles, but the manifestation of a vicious, long-dormant curse, an ancient evil slumbering in history's darkest corners. Images flooded his mind, clandestine rites performed with ritual daggers and wands, the secret techniques of Slytherin's orthodox heirs, and the forbidden Parseltongue resonance spell, all centered around rotating rings set with gleaming gemstones. Each fragment of this arcane lore pressed upon his consciousness, forcing itself into every recess of his memory. In that invisible dimension, Harry felt another presence entwined with his own, a dark, faceless figure that fed on his mounting dread. As his negative emotions surged, the shadow grew stronger, merging its will with his and driving him deeper into torment. Yet even in this nightmare, Harry clung to a single thought. The Resurrection Stone must hold the key to breaking this curse and restoring him to wholeness once more. The black gem's top spun faster and faster, so violently that the air itself seemed to tremble. As it accelerated, the shape hovering above it sharpened into a hideous clarity. At first glance, the face appeared to be Harry's, only more beautiful, more perfect, yet grotesquely warped. It was as if Harry's features had been carved into something inhumanly elegant, with high sculpted cheekbones and a nose so straight it could have belonged to a marble statue. Worst of all were the eyes, slitted, blood-red pupils that glowed like burning embers, set against an inky black sclera that seemed to swallow every stray ray of light. Then, in an abrupt, thunderous stop, the gem ceased its rotation. A deep, sonorous thudding began in its core, boom, 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 like the heartbeat of some colossal beast. At the same moment, the figure's chest heaved with its own pulse, each heartbeat matching and amplifying the gem's drumming cadence. With every throb, the ruby-red eyes flickered wider, and a low, inhuman growl rumbled through the chamber. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the gem's pulse cut out. Silence slammed into the room, broken only by a single piercing scream, a shrill, agonized shriek so eerily familiar that Harry's blood ran cold. The figure before him shuddered, its humanoid form unraveling in ripples of shadow and scale. Limbs fused and bones cracked, elongating into a sinuous body covered in glossy black scales. In mere seconds, where that horrifying visage had once floated, there now coiled a monstrous serpent whose massive head nearly grazed the vaulted ceiling. Harry staggered back, heart pounding, as the snake's red eyes fixed on him with predatory hunger. In his mind, the words of the counter-curse raced through his memory, every syllable and every hand movement he had drilled 1,000 times. He could feel the solution teetering on the edge of his thoughts, ready to surface. Steeling himself, he took a trembling breath, prepared to unleash the only magic powerful enough to end this nightmare. Harry scarcely had time to blink before the air around him twisted, aligning itself with the winding path of the colossal serpent. A faint series of clicks echoed through the chamber as the gem's protective shell, the very safeguard Voldemort had woven into it, began to crack. With each widening fissure, the Dark Lord's final curse erupted in smoky tendrils, black as night and threaded with flickers of red. Drawn irresistibly to the serpent's sinuous form, the malignant smoke poured into its alas, vanishing as though swallowed whole. At that same instant, something slipped free from the fractured ring on Harry's finger. It was a small, unremarkable black stone. Gravity seemed to lose its grip on it. The stone hovered in midair, utterly unmoving. Then, as if obeying some unseen law, it began to orbit Harry with silent precision, like a moon circling the earth. Fine cracks spiderwebbed across the stone's dull surface, forming two chalk-white symbols, a circle and a triangle. The circular glyph suddenly glowed with molten intensity, as though lava burned just beneath its crust. The very foundations of the house trembled. From the floating stone at the center, an invisible vortex unfurled, its pull growing irresistible. Crumbling gray walls, rotten doors, even the dusty hearth rattled and drifted toward that point of force. The black stone behaved like a miniature black hole, devouring everything in its path. Harry swallowed hard, his heart pounding. Whatever power this stone possessed, it was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and it was far from done. A stack of filthy pots and jars on the shelves rippled as if made of black plasticine, like pencil sketches being rubbed out, and began sinking into the glowing ring's cracks. When Harry's mind finally caught up with the onrush of images, the house had vanished. All that remained were the choking wall of nettles, massive black snakes slithering through them, and countless dark stones, frozen in midair, suspended on a perfect circle. What just? He tried to say, but only a strange hiss escaped his lips. Glancing down, he caught the flicker of two shadows in the giant snake's golden eyes, and in his own. It was as if he now possessed two bodies at once. In that instant, his left hand sprang into motion, flicking out a handful of knives with uncanny precision. Simultaneously, his right foot swept upward and outward in an impossible arc, lifting him from the ground and propelling him forward. Within a single heartbeat, like a scene fast-forwarded on a TV, Harry burst free of the nettle thicket and came to a stop on solid earth once more. Harry felt the smooth curve of the black stone slide back into the folds of his robe as he moved. 5 feet ahead of him, as silent as a shadow, the great black serpent shimmered into view. Harry tensed, and in the same instant, the snake dissolved into his body once more, leaving no trace behind. He barely registered the resurrection stone nestled against his belly. Instead, his attention was drawn to the small dagger in his left hand. The blade, long since stripped of bloodstains and rust, now gleamed like polished glass. In its mirror-bright surface, he saw his own green eyes staring back at him. That transformation into a dragon and then abruptly back to human had happened almost without his awareness. The memory of it tingled at the edges of his mind. That knowledge is real, he whispered to himself. He recalled the step he'd just taken, a movement known among Slytherin's true heirs as mire feet, or more commonly, the snake step. It allowed the wielder to glide over marshy ground as effortlessly as a serpent. Slytherin himself, legend said, had risen from the heart of a hidden quagmire, an origin that spoke to both cunning and survival. In those ancient days, when wizards and muggles hunted one another in equal measure, mastery of magic alone wasn't always enough. The cold steel of a blade could mean the difference between life and death. So the founders prized not only charms and hexes, but also the art of the knife. Harry slid the dagger's tip beneath his belt and straightened. Somewhere beyond the misted air lay his next challenge, and he intended to meet it with every advantage Slytherin's legacy could offer. Salazar, Slytherin had honed his craft in the swampy boglands, shaping his spells into a merciless art, one hand clutching a dagger, the other a staff. Unlike Godric Gryffindor, who also bore a blade and a wand but cloaked his power in chivalry, Slytherin made no such pretense. By the time he carved out his reputation, legends even claim he raised a fortress in the Scottish Highlands. He chose to conceal the more brutal aspects of his technique and delve into treacherous black magic. In his youth, he had wielded that dagger so cunningly it earned the name Snake's Kiss. The blade lay hidden as fangs beneath his palm, so deeply sheathed that no one could draw it but his closest confidant, the secretive Barrow, and Slytherin's true blood descendants. They alone mastered the deadly precision of those poison-tipped strikes. Now, centuries later, there was another Harry. He paused in the clearing, gazing up at the sky. The sun had begun its arc toward the southwestern horizon. It was well past noon. And elsewhere, an ominous figure stood rapt, listening to the beat of his heart. With each pulse, he drew forth the last remnants of Voldemort's fractured soul. His form rippled and shrank until he became a sinuous black serpent. The creature coiled around the cursed ring, Voldemort's Horcrux, and fed upon its dark enchantment. As the curse unraveled, the ring dissolved, revealing its true nature, the Resurrection Stone. After the Resurrection Stone reclaimed its power, the old Gaunt house simply vanished, leaving only one task, to conduct a true resurrection ceremony. In the final step, he would have to return to Hogwarts and call out his mother's name once more, because important days demanded a proper ritual. It happened to be Easter Sunday, and Penelope decided to mark the occasion with a grand finale screening of the new Harry Potter and the Resurrection Stone film. Dragging along a somewhat bored Fleur, as well as their friends Kate and Ryan, she led them into Hogwarts's Great Hall. Glittering Easter eggs hung from the rafters, and long tables had been pushed aside to make room for an enormous projection screen. As the hall darkened, Peter Pettigrew's old cinema projector flickered to life. On the giant screen, Harry, his body swollen with dragon's blood, flapped his great luminous wings one last time. His eyes glazed over, each breath he drew rattled like thunder. Then, stumbling forward in a daze, he lumbered away from the ruins of the Ministry and toward the spot where the Gaunt mansion once stood. Penelope watched every flicker of flame in Harry's scaled hide. Fleur folded her arms, trying to feign indifference, but unable to tear her gaze away. Kate shivered, and Ryan leaned forward, caught between awe and dread. The music swelled as Harry's steps turned mechanical, his dragon form moving like a shell of a creature. "No turning back now," Penelope whispered. "In a moment he'll call her name, his mother's name, and everything will change." The projector rattled, the picture stuttered, and for a heartbeat the great hall was silent, only the echo of dragon wings filling the air. Then, as the credits began to roll, Penelope felt a thrilling tingle. The resurrection ceremony, the climax of their story, was about to begin. Chapter 252, a sky-high topic. Harry Potter, What Happened? To everyone's surprise, it wasn't Penelope, already glued to the screen, nor inquisitive Kate who spoke up. It was Fleur, who'd been yawning with boredom, her attention only half on the broadcast. Ryan cleared his throat and answered, "He's been summoned by the Resurrection Stone. After absorbing Voldemort's power, Harry also inherited the Peverell bloodline, so the stone recognized him as a direct descendant of Cadmus. On top of that, his heart is just and compassionate, qualities most of his forebears never had. Combined with magical strength rivaling a demigod, he met every requirement to become the stone's heir. That's why its power activated." Penelope leaned forward, curious. "So the stone only responded because Harry appeared? Let me get this straight. To inherit the Resurrection Stone, you need Slytherin blood, a righteous heart, and demigod-level magic? Then Voldemort would be ruled out for lacking any sense of justice. And what about Professor Riddle at our school? Does he qualify under those conditions?" Ryan shook his head, regret heavy in his voice. "It could have happened exactly that way. The Resurrection Stone's justice is absolute, and as cold as ice. But the one who wields it is still Tom Riddle. Remember, Voldemort murdered James Potter, a Peverell by blood. He committed the ultimate betrayal of kin. That sin alone stripped him of any right to the Peverell inheritance. Then he went to the Gaunt Shack, just as Dumbledore later did." "Why bring up Dumbledore?" Kate asked, once a devoted fan of the headmaster. She covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. "Are you saying he was unhappy?" Ryan blinked, realizing she'd misunderstood. "No, that's not what I meant. I only mentioned Dumbledore because, in the original timeline, he was the one who ventured into the Gaunt house alone. But the comparison breaks down the moment you remember who Tom Riddle truly is. He isn't just another Horcrux. He is the Master Soul. A Horcrux may cling to a piece of someone's power, but the Master Soul reigns supreme. Even if a Horcrux barely survived inside that black ring or the gem, or even contained the Resurrection Stone, it would be snuffed out in an instant if the main soul willed it." Eaten and wiped clean by Riddle Ryan's words only confirmed Kate's growing suspicion. It was her presence, not his, that mattered. Resolute, she slid closer, her hip brushing against his. Penelope, long accustomed to their familiar closeness, barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the projected display ahead of them. "So the Resurrection Stone isn't a Horcrux?" Kate asked, leaning in. "Not at all," Ryan replied. "It remains one of the Deathly Hallows, specifically endowed with the power to bring the dead back." Furong turned from her seat to glare at the giant screen, where the black gem pulsed like a faint heartbeat. Then what about that riddle at your school? If the stone won't recognize him as its heir, is he in any other way like that dark-skinned, snake-eyed Harry Potter? Ryan shook his head. He's actually very different. The shards of Voldemort's soul trapped in the gem and in his ring were drawn under the stone's control, and he surrendered them willingly. Apart from the last agonized screams as he died, that piece of Voldemort never awoke. Harry never had to face a single dark magic trap or curse hidden in the house. Ryan tightened his grip on the dark gem. If Tom Riddle himself were here, this Horcrux wouldn't last a moment, but even Riddle would have to unravel these curses, step by step. One careless flick of his wand, and the entire carriage might overturn. In an instant, the black gemstone shattered, its fragments reassembling into 3 levitating obsidian stones, each etched with a curious emblem that looked almost like an eye. Kate leaned against Ryan's thigh and whispered, "What's that eye-shaped mark?" Ryan held up a slender finger and drew a vertical line in the air. That's the crack of eternity, more commonly called the Elder Wand. He tapped the top of the line, draw, wing a perfect circle. That's the Resurrection Stone. Then he traced a triangle around both shapes, and this triangle is the Invisibility Cloak. Together, they form the Deathly Hallows. Pinello stroked his chin, gazing at the hovering symbols. So if someone gathered all 3 hallows, would this emblem ignite, like a seal breaking open? Ryan shook his head. Activate all 3 at once, and you'd claim the full power of the Death God. But there's a catch. Death must already recognize an owner. Rush to collect them before that bond is formed, and you're only painting a target on yourself, inviting Death's attention rather than mastering it. You see, he explained, even if someone obtains one of the Deathly Hallows, if its wielder isn't a true descendant of Peverell, Death itself will take notice. It's as though someone from far away is calling your name. As the Grim Reaper, you can look over your shoulder to see who it is, or you can simply ignore the summons. Pinello frowned thoughtfully. In that case, Death would almost always ignore the call, she said. The Elder Wand, for example, changed hands many times before Dumbledore held it, and most of its bearers met violent ends. Only Grigorovich and Grindelwald escaped unharmed. If every unworthy user triggered Death's attention, it would have been chaos. Exactly, he replied. No one has kept the Elder Wand for long, except those 3. Grigorovich's tenure was the shortest. After merely studying the wand, he lost it to Grindelwald, who stole it outright, yet that brief encounter inspired Grindelwald's own mastery. That's why, among the great European wand-makers, Grigorovich's creations are famed for their raw power, while Ollivander's are prized above all for their stability. Every wand that leaves Ollivander's workshop is an ingenious work of art, each possessing its own living spirit. Among them, Maupassant's wands are the epitome of refinement, celebrated for their incredible magical adaptability. So remarkable is this quality that even a squib with the right guidance can perform simple charms, like the ever-popular Lumos, with one of these wands. Of course, a wand is more than just a focus for a witch or wizard's power. It actually stores traces of magic, sometimes releasing that residual energy at unexpected moments. This stored power is also why a wand will actively repel an untrained hand. Take, for example, the infamous incident of 1790. A muggle named Bartholomew Barebone absconded with Dorcas Twelvetrees' wand and paraded it before the press. He claimed that a single flick unleashed a force as if kicked by a mule, hurling anyone nearby clear across the room. Albus Dumbledore, however, devised a clever workaround, one that only the most delicate wands could support, like those crafted by Maupassant. A wizard can imprint a gentle enchantment on the wand, and by concentrating on a specific individual while casting it, ensure that the stored power does not resist that person, even if they are a muggle. It was with such a modified Maupassant wand that Dumbledore once gifted Queenie Goldstein's husband, Jacob. Thanks to that subtle enchantment, Jacob, though a true muggle, can now perform a handful of simple spells without a hint of resistance from his wand. Because he was officially registered as a no-mage in the United States, people assumed his magic was weak. He was nearly branded a squib. Fortunately, his memory was never wiped again, and in time he went on to marry Queenie Goldstein. Chapter 250 Thrive, the Resurrection Ceremony, descending from heaven to humanity. "Are you watching me, Death?" Harry called out, his voice calm as he stood straddling the border between sunlight and shadow, eyes fixed on the darkness behind him. At Castle Smith, Kate's heart pounded. She reached out and gently tapped Ryan's cheek, as if testing whether he and the conversation they'd been having were real. She was convinced that ordinary sight had nothing to do with death itself. If it did, Ryan never would have so casually switched the subject to that staff maker in France. "But remember," Ryan had warned, "what you're seeing in Harry is only possible because of the Resurrection Stone. Its full power can be used only once. The moment Lily Evans is truly brought back, the stone's magic will be sealed forever, and Harry Potter will revert to mortal form." Despite Ryan's sober explanation, Kate couldn't help staring in awe at Harry. He'd become a double wizard whose physical strength and magical capacity teetered on demigod territory, something almost unheard of. Yet even in this exalted state, Harry had detected the circle light spell, a finely honed piece of observational magic that he himself had invented. She turned back to Ryan, her voice trembling with questions she couldn't hold in. "But aren't the Deathly Hallows meant to be eternal? How can the Resurrection Stone's power simply be sealed away?" Penello, who'd only just been introduced to the Deathly Hallows by Lane, looked at Ryan with genuine curiosity. Instead of answering her, he turned to the others. "Tell me, of the three Peverell brothers, which one was truly the most powerful? Which sat closest to Death's own throne?" Kate answered at once, brimming with confidence. "The youngest brother, of course. He outwitted Death and became the current god of death himself." Ryan shook his head, allowing a small smile to play at his lips. "You've missed something important. Among the three Hallows, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Cloak of Invisibility, only the Resurrection Stone bears the full Hallows symbol, a circle inside a triangle bisected by a line. Each element of that symbol represents one brother. The straight line is for Antioch, the eldest, who prized power above all else. The circle is Cadmus, the middle brother, who sought to call back the dead, and the encompassing triangle belongs to Ignotus, the youngest, who mastered the art of concealment. Ask yourselves, which of them really sat nearest death? It was Ignotus Peverell. He vanished from the world under his cloak and was never forced to stand before death's judgment. In that way, he became the true Reaper. Kate's smile wavered as Penello's eyes widened. Ryan pressed on. And his legacy didn't end with him. Ignotus's descendants have shaped the wizarding world for centuries. From his line sprang powerful figures, like Salazar Slytherin himself. One branch sailed across the ocean to found Ilvermorny's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in North America. Another ventured east and established the Hidden Moon City. Meanwhile, the Elder Wand lay broken, and Cadmus's Resurrection Stone has long been lost. Yet the spirit of Ignotus, the boy who chose cunning and discretion over confrontation, still lives on in every hidden corner of magical history. Silence fell for a moment as the three friends absorbed this. Penello exchanged a look with Lane. Both were impressed. In that instant, they understood that the legend of the Deathly Hallows wasn't just an old fairy tale. It was the very foundation upon which generations of witches and wizards had built their destiny. Here's a coherent, polished version of the passage. At a moment when the mantle of the god of death was poised to pass to a new heir, Tom Riddle emerged, hailed by many as the greatest of the second-born. Yet from the moment of his birth, he was incomplete. Created through a love potion, he was utterly incapable of love itself, the single most powerful force in existence. This fatal defect drove him due, when a dark path. He murdered his father and was forever barred from inheriting Death's legacy. In the struggle for succession, the mark of the god of death shifted instead to Harry Potter, the third-born. Frank Longbottom and Mary Smith lingered only as distant alternates, their claims set aside. Cadmus Peverell's own attempt at securing the Resurrection Stone failed for a far simpler reason. He lacked the one quality the ancient death most prized, a kind heart. By forcing the living back from beyond the grave, his power violated death's natural order, desecrating the boundary between life and death. "Of course," Penello murmured, eyes brightening with sudden insight. "That's why the Resurrection Stone bears such an odd stipulation. Its heir must possess genuine compassion." Cadmus realized too late why he had stumbled. In his wisdom, and perhaps his sorrow, he embedded that very condition into the artifact. He understood better than anyone what his youngest brother, Ignotus, was made of. This version preserves every key plot point and character detail, while ensuring the narrative reads smoothly and naturally for an English-speaking audience. As future successors are chosen from the Peverell line, pure-blooded descendants always take precedence. Much like Neville and me, both heirs of Antioch, we were schooled from childhood to stay hidden, to speak only when necessary. Ryan curled his lip in amusement. So Antioch and Cadmus aren't really dead? Even in defeat, they can still reach out to the living world? Kate's brow furrowed. They can influence events from beyond? Clearing his throat, Ryan replied, "That brings us back to Penello's question about the Deathly Hallows. Those relics aren't mere trinkets, they're vessels for the divine wizard's power, which is inherently immortal. Both the eldest Peverell brother and the middle brother exist in the afterlife, like any departed witch or wizard, but because each ascended to become a spiritual wizard, a true successor to the god of death, they retain, call them tendrils here in our realm." Kate's eyes went wide. So the Deathly Hallows themselves are those tendrils? And stripping someone of the title severs those ties, allowing the god of death to reclaim his domain? Ryan nodded. Exactly. In fact, Harry's current condition could be likened to a demigod. Most witches and wizards, even those first-generation spiritual ones, possessed bodies of such resilience and power that ordinary mortals could hardly imagine them. The quality of his magic rivaled that of both gods and the earliest wizards, enriched now by a divine power fused with his own. In many respects, he had become the equal of the first-generation sorcerers, unconstrained by the rigid dogmas that bind modern practitioners, a figure even today's mages whisper about as a living god. "Do you really think Harry Potter will choose to resurrect his mother?" Fleur's voice held a chill as she spoke. Kate and Penello exchanged uncertain looks, so Fleur went on. "Ryan warned us, once you use the resurrection stone, you become one with it. He was always precise about that. If Harry doesn't use it now, his godlike abilities will remain intact. But the stone only works once. After that, even if Dumbledore or the rest get their hands on it, it's just a useless trinket. If Potter decides to bring his mother back, he'll lose everything he's gained. He'll be mortal once more." Ryan's eyes darkened as he stared at the portrait before him. "He will," he said quietly, "because he is Harry Potter." Far away, Harry had no inkling of the trust placed in him. He stood frozen, motionless, as if time itself had paused around him. While Ryan and the others continued their animated discussion, they never dispelled the hovering circle of light above them. Harry, bathed in its unblinking glow, grew certain it was the very god of death fixing him with its gaze. "Look at me, and only me, death incarnate," he rasped, chest tightening as he drew in a trembling breath. He fumbled for the resurrection stone, ding it in the hollow of his hand, and waiting for a sign. For an instant, nothing stirred. The spectral image of the Gaunt family's dilapidated manor dissolved into mist, but the heady rush of raw power still pulsed through his veins. Harry's vision turned inward, past the confines of his skull, to perceive the unthinkable. His own soul, a pale, shimmering orb at the core of his being. A jolt of recognition shot through him. This was the resurrection ritual. Ryan had promised he'd grasp once he possessed the stone, the same strange task panel that had flickered across Harry's retina all summer. And there, stamped on the luminous sphere, was a dark blotch, the telltale seal of the rite itself. No sooner had Harry identified the mark than it detonated, sending a white-hot surge of energy rippling outward. He clenched his eyes shut against the brilliance, every nerve aflame as reality seemed to warp around him. Time lost all meaning. Minutes, or perhaps hours, slipped by in the blinding aftermath. When Harry finally dared to open his eyes, the world looked startlingly different. Every shape and shadow infused with new significance. Knowledge flooded his mind. The legends of the first-generation wizards and the ancient line they'd begun. The precise alignment of body and soul required to wield true magic. The grim, hidden purpose of the resurrection ceremony itself. Harry's breath came slow and steady. He had crossed a threshold, and in doing so, he had unlocked destinies he could never unlearn. Harry's brow furrowed as he stared at the ancient inscription before him. Cadmus Peverell, he whispered, almost to himself. So I'm his heir now. Does that make me a god? His voice wavered between disbelief and awe. All this perfect magical power, wasn't granted out of charity. It's the key to fulfilling the heir's conditions, the vessel needed to contain that power. He closed his eyes and took a steadying breath. When he opened them again, their usual warmth had given way to a hard, unwavering resolve. The resurrection rite, he said slowly. It's designed to draw a soul down from the heavens into our world. In exchange, the caster must relinquish every last ounce of magic. And before the sealing spell of my ancestors can bind me forever, I will serve as the anchor, my final sacrifice, to call my mother back. Harry clenched his fists, knowing the path ahead would cost him everything, but he would not falter. Author's note, I know I've been less present lately, but I'll continue posting 2 updates each month unless I announce otherwise. Thank you for your patience and your support. Chapter 726, A Mother and Son Reunited. Harry finally understood the dreadful secret behind the Resurrection Stone. When anyone except its true heir uses it, the brief return of the dead isn't really a summoning, it's something far more dangerous. The departed don't come because you call them, they call you. By activating the stone, you step unwittingly into the realm of the dead, drawn by the love of those who've passed on, or by your own longing to see them again. But what appears before you isn't a real soul. It's a projection, the echo of everything you imagine the afterlife to be. And that is the cruelest deception of all. In that vision, death ceases to be a loss and becomes a kind of gain, a chance to reunite with lost loved ones, to erase the finality of goodbye. Mourning transforms into naive hope, as though separation were no more than a brief pause. Even more perilous is the effect on the living world. The moment the stone is raised, the boundary between life and death thins. A wizard can sense it, the seductive whisper of eternity, the promise that the afterlife is beautiful and eternal. It beckons with irresistible allure, and the longer you stay under its spell, the deeper you're drawn toward a place from which there is no return. Harry drew in a steadying breath. This resurrection stone felt less like a simple relic and more like a cheat code for the afterlife, and somehow it knew exactly what he wanted. It wriggled in his palm like a reluctant creature, slipped free, and began to spin. Immediately, the world around him shifted. The rough dirt road underfoot smoothed itself out, its ruts and stones vanishing as though swept away by invisible hands. The wind's faint sigh died, the insects' chirps fell silent, and the air stilled into an uncanny hush. He blinked and found himself standing again on that same sleek platform where Ryan had once addressed him in the dream world. Yet everything was different. A pale mist drifted at the edges of his vision, but this was no ordinary fog. Rather than enveloping the landscape, it hung in the air unshaped, the very raw material of a world yet to be formed. Harry shifted his weight, noting how the surface beneath his feet felt unlike any ground he'd ever known. It was startlingly smooth and featureless, white as untouched snow, neither warm nor cold, just an endless, empty plain. In that moment of perfect silence and blankness, Harry realized he stood on the threshold of something new, a realm beyond life and death, summoned by the stone's power and by his own resolve. He wasn't alarmed by the bizarre phenomena unfolding around him. In fact, he felt calmer than he ever had in Gunter's old house. Everything in this place seemed to bend to his will, yet he remained still, his instincts telling him that action wasn't yet necessary. After a brief moment of surprise, he fixed his gaze on the rotating resurrection stone. As it spun faster, wisps of vapor, cloud-like and pale, poured from its surface, weaving into the fog that already filled the air. Gradually, the mist began to part, and the world took shape. First, the brilliant sun appeared overhead, then a vast circular glass roof that glittered like a jewel in its rays. The oppressive silence broke as the distant, clattering rumble of a train echoed through the space. He turned on the spot, and his surroundings materialized in full. Before him stretched a colossal hall, far larger than any auditorium he had ever seen, bathed in light and perfectly clean. Above it rose a crystal-clear dome, just like the one at King's Cross Station, only here it was deserted, utterly silent, except for the hiss of steam. Even the tracks were shrouded in that same ghostly fog, and he was the only soul present. Harry stood alone on the deserted platform, the only sound the distant chuffing of an approaching train. He didn't merely hear it, he felt the engine's presence in his bones, more keenly than with any ordinary sense. It was as if an invisible cord tethered him to that locomotive, growing taut with every rhythmic clang of the wheels. Then, through the silvery mist, a wine-red steam engine materialized and hissed to a halt beside the empty platform. Its polished brass nameplate read Little Hangleton, 2 p.m. Harry glanced around in surprise. The familiar ticket gates had vanished, replaced by a wrought iron archway inscribed with a single question, Platform 9. A thick cloud of smoke drifted over the silent station hall, which otherwise resembled King's Cross, absent only its bustling crowd. Harry hardly noticed the drifting soot. His gaze was fixed on a lock of fiery red hair shining in the carriage window. Without hesitation, he broke into a run toward the arch and felt the resurrection stone, suspended in midair, follow him as he dashed forward. Harry leapt onto the train and dashed through the empty carriages, heart hammering in his chest. At last, he reached the last car, the one tied to his memory, where he'd caught that flash of fiery red hair. He was certain he'd followed the right trail. As he approached, the resurrection stone in his pocket grew unbearably hot, making the air around him shimmer and warp. Cautiously, he knocked on the door. With a clang, the sliding panel swung open. Harry's breath caught in his throat. There, sitting before him, was his mother, Lily Potter, looking impossibly young and radiant. She brushed her long red hair back from her face and fixed him with a smile that made his own heart ache. Those same emerald eyes of his glowed with an eager, almost desperate joy, as though she could never quite fill her gaze with him. "You're extraordinary," she murmured, voice soft but bright. "I heard you married, and that you and Molly have a child?" Harry's pulse quickened. "How do you know?" he whispered, stepping inside. He sank onto the seat beside her, gently taking her hand in his. It was warm and soft, carrying the faint scent of sunshine, a reminder of summers long past. In that perfect, fragile moment, Harry realized that the world of the dead, though vast and unknowable, could feel startlingly close. "James and I have been in almost constant contact with the newcomers from your world," she said, though her smile slowly faded. "We've learned so much straight from their lips." She took a breath, eyes distant. A lonely, abusive childhood. Instant fame upon arriving at Hogwarts. You defeated Voldemort a second time, forged friendships with the Malfoy twins, became engaged to Ginny, and earned your place as a Hogwarts champion. You even indulged in forbidden fruit at the Halloween dance, then pulled off that spectacular transformation in the most recent contest. I thought I knew your story, until I discovered Severus has been an undercover agent all along, going back to his student days. She tapped the copy of the Daily Prophet she held. I believed every sensational headline, and James was convinced he'd be ruthless toward you. Clearly, he was wrong. Wade from Yorkshire, his grandson is at Hogwarts with you, told me that Snape actually favors you. "Mom, can we go, please?" Harry interrupted, anxiety tinging his voice. He'd never met his father since coming to consciousness, and the longer they delayed, the more awkward it would become. "Harry, I'm not coming back to life." Lily held up a finger to hush him as he paced, panic written across his face. "You can't know what the future holds for you in our world. If you bring me back, what will you be asking for next?" Harry tightened his grip on the resurrection stone, its eerie light flickering across his features. "I understand perfectly well," he said quietly. "It's never been just about you. This stone grants power over death itself. I'm one step away from becoming a death god. With its divine force, I could even wrench my fate toward your world and claim a throne no mortal was meant to sit upon. But I don't need that." As he spoke, the stone's dormant power stirred, weaving around him like a living shadow. Above them, the station's destination board, once reading Little Hangleton, blurred, the letters melting and reforming. When the mist cleared, it displayed a single word. Hogwarts. Chapter 77. Resurrection of Lily Evans. A rush of scorched air hit her as the crimson steam locomotive roared to life. Lily Evans recoiled, choking on a cloud of soot. "Harry!" she cried out, but the train thundered on before her, its tracks glowing like molten lava, She surged forward, desperate to stop it, but she was powerless. In the afterlife, her magic had long since ebbed away, and she no longer carried a wand. If she ever held one again, she feared it would still be useless against this roaring behemoth. Inside the engine's cab, Harry stood unmoving. His body glowed with a divine radiance that pulsed and shimmered. Arcane power coalesced into a ring of light hovering above his heart. It perfectly matched the circular scar on the resurrection stone embedded in his chest, an ominous seal that seemed to churn like magma. Outside the windows, the world blurred into a kaleidoscope of memories. Lily's heart pounded as she realized she was witnessing the scenes of her own life in reverse, from her final moments back to her first breath. The first image seared itself into her mind. Voldemort's cruel laughter echoed in a vast, empty chamber. His wand erupted in a flash of sickly green light that blossomed into death itself. The memories tumbled on. There was James Potter, sure of himself, always scheming, cornering Severus Snape in a deserted corridor. He thought himself clever, setting up a prank that left Severus fuming, though always just out of Lily's sight. And there was Severus's silent restraint when her bright green eyes found his, the way he swallowed his anger rather than draw her into another one of their quarrels. The visions shifted again, and Lily found herself standing in the gray morning light of a nearly abandoned playground. She and her best friend, Penelope Penny Fletcher, were swinging side by side. If it weren't for the distant scolding from Lily's older sister, Petunia, the bench-like seats would have seemed the height of carefree joy. As each swing reached its peak, Lily, just as she had always done, let go of the chains for a single thrilling moment of weightless freedom. In that suspended instant, Lily felt the thrill of life itself, and then everything went dark. Harry drew upon the instinctive magic he had just unearthed and shot into the air, twisting and turning like an acrobat. He hovered there for a heartbeat before settling back to the platform with barely a sound. Hidden in the bushes, Snape watched the entire display, his eyes wide with astonishment. Nearby, Lily stood transfixed, her gaze fixed on her son. As Harry danced through the air, memories Lily had long buried began to surface in vivid detail. She felt again the surge of wonder when she first tapped into her magic, the rush of soaring weightlessly, even the sharp pinch of her childhood braces. She remembered the secure warmth of Petunia's arms holding her as a baby, the gentle sweetness of her mother's water, and the soft morning light filtering through her nursery curtains, painting her cheeks golden. But while Lily reclaimed these forgotten fragments of her past, Harry experienced the opposite. The crystalline balance between light and dark magic, the sense of holiness intertwined with depravity, slipped away from him. The chaotic, all-consuming power born in the wake of the divine resurrection began to ebb, and the omnipotent aura that had suffused the entire train started to fade. One by one, the carriages began to peel away and crash to the rails below. The phoenix's cry turned sorrowful, and the ancient spirits howled in mourning. Harry felt his strength draining, even though he was still far more powerful than when he'd left Hogwarts. A single thought could erase the boy he once was. His magic, an ocean of raw, bottomless energy, proved this was no illusion. Yet despite that power, he was undeniably weakening. The divine substance within his magic was sloughing off, acting as a force of resistance against death and rebirth. Boom! The train lurched, its speed faltering under the growing drag. Then, in an instant, a new power surged to life, the very magic of Hogwarts itself. Ethereal cables shot out from the castle, wrapping around the engine and pulling it forward. No matter how great the train's resistance became, this tethered enchantment would not let it stop. "Is this why Ryan summoned me back to Hogwarts, to resurrect his mother?" Harry whispered, his heart pounding with excitement. His gaze, sharpened to a godlike clarity, pierced every strand of the magical cable. Even Peeves, who had spent the journey skirting around him, now watched in stunned awe. Harry's blood ran cold as the creature before him revealed its true form. Towering like an inverted crown, its horns spiraled upward in a regal arc. Milky white scales pulsed with a smoldering red glow, and its cobalt-blue eyes gleamed with uncanny intelligence. When it spread its wings, broad, silver-white membranes of such span, they could have enveloped all of Hogwarts. The air itself seemed to shiver. "Leave the sleeping dragon alone?" Harry whispered, horrified. You mean, Peeves is the dragon? Indeed, the filth-slinging poltergeist now stood before Harry in spectral clarity. Yet despite his fearsome visage, Peeves remained untouchable. Students streamed through his insubstantial body as casually as they might pass through an empty doorway. Even Professor Dumbledore, hunched over his quill in the headmaster's office, paid him no heed. In the depths of the Black Lake, too, Grindelwald, nestling his unborn charge on a silent ship's deck, saw nothing amiss, save for Harry himself. Already, his senses were slipping, deteriorating along a path far removed from anything a mere wizard might endure, though far short of the divine. He watched helplessly as the resurrection stone in his hand, the surface engraved with interlocking circles like molten veins, grew pale, its crimson magma pattern fading back to chalky white, just as it had when he first laid eyes on it. Behind him, the train trembled violently. A deafening crack split the night as the penultimate carriage sheared away, disintegrating into hissing steam. All that remained was the final compartment, where Lily sat huddled beside Harry, her eyes wide with terror. Together, they were slipping away from everything and everyone they had ever known. In a hidden dimension, invisible to almost everyone, a crimson steam locomotive with a single carriage materialized out of thin air. Bright mist swirled around its wheels as it descended onto the grounds of Hogwarts. With a hiss and a puff of cloud-like steam, the train vanished, leaving only the dissipating fog in its wake. Through that mist stood Harry and his mother, Lily, though in the eyes of the living, she did not truly exist. In Harry's hand was the last surviving Horcrux, Voldemort's ring. A faint, milky white line marked where the resurrection stone lay, buried within the band. Gingerly, Harry slipped the ring onto his finger. Centuries of magic had seeped into the stone, and at his touch, the carved circle's lines glowed once more, bright and clear. As the haze drifted away, Harry's heart pounded with triumph. He lifted his gaze toward Lily's ethereal form and called out, "Mom, I did it!" Lily watched her son, a gentle, sorrowful smile on her lips. She knew this moment was both victory and farewell. She could guide him no further. Harry closed his eyes, feeling the stone's power pulse softly beneath his skin, and prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Harry's fingers closed around the fractured ring, and the black stone tumbled into his palm, rotating on its own as if obeying some unseen will. After 3 slow revolutions, the faint sigil etched on its surface dissolved into nothingness. The ring's final surge of life-reversing magic, the divine spark that could undo death, flickered out under Harry's control and flowed away, pouring from his body in a single, shimmering wave. Suddenly, a figure materialized at Harry's side, a tall young woman with fiery red hair, her eyes bright with the thrill of life, yet shadowed by a deep, mournful regret. Harry barely had time to eat her gaze when, on a distant monitor, Kate frowned. She'd been watching everything unfold in real time. "Hold on," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "Why did this life-and-death threshold open up at King's Cross? And how did Lily Potter end up on the train? Why didn't she call out to Harry from the window?" Ryan watched the replay thoughtfully, then turned to Kate. "You noticed that too?" he said. "When Lily stepped through the gap between life and death, she returned to exactly the same state she'd been in at her birth, completely naked and utterly vulnerable. The resurrection magic restores you to your purest, earliest form. That's why she appeared there at that moment. The power of the stone brought her back to life, right where the barrier between worlds was thinnest." He paused, letting the explanation sink in. As for why she didn't call to Harry, well, the magic that resurrects you doesn't grant full memories, not immediately. Lily emerged disoriented, overwhelmed by the sheer force of being torn back from oblivion. She wasn't ready to speak, or even to recognize her son. Kate nodded slowly, her curiosity satisfied for the moment. On the screen, Harry and Lily stood together, separated by more than just disbelief, by the very boundary between death and life. And though they hadn't spoken, something in their silent reunion hinted that the story was far from over. Kate didn't even pause to greet Harry. Instead, she hurriedly summoned the robe that sprang into being at the edge of her thoughts. Thankfully, in this realm, much like in the afterlife, objects could be willed into existence. Otherwise, Lily on the train would never have been able to open the door for Harry. And once you'd been resurrected here, every moment was more precarious than the last. If Harry didn't move quickly, someone might see him. Kate clicked her tongue. What about the first two questions? Ryan gave a small, rueful sigh. King's Cross Station is the one place both Harry and his mother hold dear. It's the perfect metaphorical hub between life and death, and so the gap between the two takes the form of this station. Naturally, the vehicle for their journey is a train. He waved his hand, and the velvet curtain that showed Harry embracing his mother dissolved into a chorus of distant, heart-wrenching cries. In its place, an iron door emerged. It swung open on silent hinges, revealing the familiar towers of Hogwarts glittering in twilight. "All right," Ryan said, turning to Kate. "Let's head back to the castle. Easter at Hogwarts is bound to be lively." Chapter 728, Ariana is Married. Albus Dumbledore sat behind his enormous oak desk in the headmaster's office when a sudden surge of magic erupted around him. The silver goblets and plates perched on his desk clattered and shattered, each delicate piece crumbling to dust. Even the feather quill in his hand turned to ash. Yet Dumbledore did not flinch. "Lily," he called. As Hogwarts headmaster, Dumbledore's awareness extended throughout the castle. His network of enchanted portraits and resident ghosts passed messages like secret couriers, but more than that, the very magical aura of the castle answered to his will. No adult witch or wizard could roam these halls undetected unless they possessed the rare art of concealment, and even then, few could hide for long from Dumbledore's keen senses. The power he had just felt was unmistakably familiar and forbidden. It belonged to someone who should never have set foot at Hogwarts. If it wasn't Polyjuice Potion, then there was only one other possibility, a true return from the dead. Lily. His piercing blue eyes flashed to the window. Beyond the stone battlements, a cold afternoon sky stretched over the lake, hardly the weather that would accompany any ordinary arrival. And yet, there it was, the outline of Durmstrang's ironclad ship, anchored at the shore, as if it had just sailed out of someone's wildest dream. Dumbledore rose and turned to Professor Fawkes, standing loyally by the door. A single nod was all he needed. Fawkes gave a curt bow, then slipped out of the room to investigate. Dumbledore remained where he stood, heart racing. If his suspicions were correct, tonight would change everything. A swirling vortex of flames tore through the house in an instant, and he was gone. In his place, only the squabbling headmaster portraits, now fully awakened, and Fawkes's mournful cry remained. Meanwhile, out on the lawn of Hogwarts Castle, Lily stood unnoticed, even by Dumbledore, who was approaching, cradling her half-conscious son, Harry. He braced himself as if against a raging storm for the scolding he knew was coming. "Did you and Ginny even bother to clean up afterward? Why are you wearing so little out here? Don't you know how to layer properly? Why wouldn't you listen to your mother? Why let yourself get knocked out like that? We're all going to die someday. When you actually shuffle off this mortal coil, just wait until your ancestors have a word with you. You daft boy. Haven't you heard? When you become the Lord of Death, you'll be able to resurrect yourself as many times as you like." Lily's reprimand died on her lips when Harry's eyes fluttered open. He blinked up at her, and in a small but steady voice said, "Mom, I have another child." Instantly, the stern edge in Lily's tone softened, just as it had the first time she'd held him. "Another child?" she whispered. "You and Ginny got married, and you have a child?" Lily's gentle tone snapped like a whip. "How dare you? You're all still children." Before Harry could respond, a flicker of emerald flame danced in his hand, and Albus Dumbledore materialized beside them. His sharp blue eyes flickered to the resurrection stone Harry held, narrowing in concern. "Lily, long time no see," he said coolly, "but now's hardly the moment for old friends. Tell me about Harry's child." "Why not?" Lily bellowed, ignoring Dumbledore's calm authority. "Do you not wish to hear about Ariana? She's married." Dumbledore's genial smile froze. "Ariana? She's only a child, Lily." "Oh, but you know her name," Lily shot back, her voice bright with triumph. Harry took an involuntary step backward. His mother, it seemed, harbored depths of bitterness he'd never imagined. Lily's eyes glinted as she paused, as though savoring a delicious memory. "Let's see, Caradoc Dearborn." She laughed, sharp and scornful. "Yes, Caradoc. I used to weep for him. Poor, pitiful boy with a father who abandoned him. Disgusting." Dumbledore's expression hardened, but Lily only leaned forward, her anger crackling in the air around them. The reunion in tea. The Twilight Realm had turned into a storm no one present would easily forget. Harry's voice caught in his throat as he stared at Dumbledore. He hadn't imagined the venerable headmaster capable of such profanity. Before Harry could gather his thoughts, a burst of pale flame flickered along the corridor walls and then died away, revealing a tall, disheveled man stepping through the blaze. His hair was a tangled mass of silvery wires, his spectacles smudged and askew, yet his bright blue eyes were unmistakably Dumbledore's. Harry took an involuntary step back. This must be Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's long-estranged brother. Oddly enough, Aberforth showed no surprise at his sibling's outburst. He simply chuckled and addressed Harry directly. "Surprised, boy? Everyone thinks my so-called golden child brother here is pure sunshine. Seems you fell for it too." Harry could only nod. Aberforth's lips curled into a wry smile. "He's never been a moral saint, you know. Mother taught us the fine art of disguise, secrets and lies. That was family business. Albus was born into it." He shook his head, amusement dancing in his eyes. "But he's not good at everything, not by a long shot." Aberforth's lips twisted into a scowl. "Honestly, when it comes to cursing, you're hardly more fearsome than a 5-year-old. He strode forward, closing the distance to Albus and Lily, who still had her back turned. "Albus," he swallowed hard, then flung his head around to call, "Lily." Silence fell so suddenly that even the crackle of the fire sounded loud. Then Aberforth burst out, "It has to be you. You've discovered the secret of resurrection." He jabbed a finger at Dumbledore. "Just now, when you were calling out for Ariana, did you use that magic to bring her back?" His voice trembled with barely contained hope. "Is it really possible? Tell me it's true." After a long pause, Dumbledore cleared his throat. "Yes, Aberforth, it is indeed Lily." Aberforth's scowl flipped into something like triumph. "And she also tells me Ariana has married Caradoc." Harry, standing to the side, bit back a smile. Compared to Aberforth's florid profanities, even Dumbledore's stern reproaches seemed tame. Before Aberforth could launch into another tirade, Lily whirled on him. "Enough!" she snapped, her eyes flashing. She stole a quick glance at Harry, now a towering, broad-shouldered young man, engaged and already a father, and shook her head. She wouldn't allow such coarse language in front of him. For a moment, the three siblings stood in uneasy hush, the firelight playing across their faces, each of them weighed down by the revelation they just shared, and the impossible hope it had sparked. Lily shot Aberforth a look of sheer exasperation. "Could you please think before you curse? In that world, children do grow up. Harry isn't a child forever. And speaking of age, Ariana's actually older than Caradoc. She's the experienced one here, not him." Aberforth opened his mouth, ready to swear, but Lily's words cut him off. He grumbled instead. "No one asked your permission. Ariana adores me. She'll always be Daddy's little girl." Lily rolled her eyes. "Have you even considered that Percival and Kendra are there too? They've already accepted Caradoc as their son-in-law." Albus cleared his throat quietly. "Father?" The word felt strange on his lips after so long. "Mother and father are there as well?" Startled, Aberforth fumbled with his collar and hurriedly polished his smudged glasses. "Give me a few years. No, maybe just until tomorrow," he muttered. "When I see them, I'll have a proper talk. You let it slide, Albus. But Ariana's favorite brother, planned to be married before arriving. Can't I at least postpone this for a bit longer?" Chapter 729. Snape is about to appear. "Where's Professor Snape, and where have all the key players gone?" Kate demanded, eyeing the two Dumbledore brothers as they paced anxiously, fretting over the news of their sister's return. She was hungry for something more exciting. After all, Ryan had once burst into Snape's potions class lugging a hot pot, partly to keep the playing field level, partly in the hope of bargaining for a useful tool. Yet before he could make his move, someone called Exception had already warned Snape of Lily's impending resurrection, and even disclosed the exact time. "Have you forgotten?" Kate pressed. "In his current state, is Snape even able to show himself? More to the point, would he dare face Lily, his greatest attachment, right now?" "That's so boring," Kate groaned. She counted off names on her fingers. Sirius, maybe James Potter, Lupin and Hagrid, their families, Professor McGonagall, plus her late husband and her parents. Just imagine the fireworks. Ryan smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind Kate's ear. "How could I disappoint you, my dear?" he murmured, stroking her round cheek. So, he really is going to appear? Kate's eyes lit up. That's the plan, Ryan confirmed softly. I'll teach him a neat little magic trick, Ryan said, a mischievous glint in his eye. Why be stingy when Voldemort himself, a veritable demon king in our village, once revealed the secret of flight? When did Voldemort teach you that? Asked Hermione, folding her arms. About 3 years ago, Ryan replied with a cryptic smile. Or at least that was the original plan. Half an hour earlier, in room 23 of Spider End Alley, the cramped padded cell had undergone a startling transformation. Only the book-lined walls remained intact. Everything else, the sagging sofa, moth-eaten armchairs, and rickety table, had been torn out. In their place stood a massive wooden vat, its depths filled with murky, saline water and a thin bed of soil at the bottom. Severus Snape, bundled in heavy robes, stood sentry beside the vat. At his feet lay the carcass of an enormous pale gray warthog, its bulk filling nearly half the chamber. Any magizoologist would have recognized it at once as a Tebo warthog, a level 4 times magical creature famed for its ability to turn invisible, making it notoriously difficult and dangerously unpredictable to track or capture. Seeing it now, dismantled and motionless, was both a marvel and a grim testament to the lengths they were willing to go to test that secret of flight. Even though a Tebo warthog's hide is worth a small fortune, ideal for forging shields and plate armor, a fully intact specimen is nearly impossible to come by. The only way to preserve a corpse so perfectly is by invoking a forbidden death curse, and any lingering magic in the beast's body is consumed by that very spell. In short, a Tebo warthog carcass, still humming with arcane energy, and valued at over 1,000 gold galleons, should be the most jealously guarded trophy in any collector's vault. Instead, someone had tossed it aside, like yesterday's refuse. Severus Snape stood motionless over the carcass, his obsidian eyes alight with a flicker of sanguine fire. He watched as one might wait for a signal, silent, still, expectant. 3 long minutes passed in the hush. She's back. His voice trembled with controlled excitement. Snape cleared his throat and spoke again, this time softly, as if addressing an old friend. You stand here as the living avatar of the god of renewal, Raha, beast lord of indomitability. There was something almost devotional in the way he pronounced each word, his usual Cockney accent melding with the precise enunciation of an educated wizard. The effect was unsettlingly reverent. At once, the Tebo warthog's remains began to stir. The cloven jet-black hooves shrank and softened. The rigid horn joints blurred and shifted. In their place sprouted flesh and bone that looked startlingly human, hands, wrists, and forearms, as if the creature were reborn beneath Snape's watchful gaze. 2 muscular arms burst forth from beneath the beast's flanks, reshaping what had been a pig's body into that of a mighty human warrior. With each newly formed limb, an ancient weapon materialized in its grasp, a gleaming discus, a heavy mace, a keen-edged sword, and a celestial bow. Even the boar's head contorted. 2 honed tusks snapped free like blades sliding from their sheaths. He is the son of Cassioppa and Didi, the Asura Golden Eye who conquered the Earth Goddess. He is the grandson of Brahma, who lifted the world only to plunge it into the abyssal sea. He is the prophesied enemy of Vishnu. At Snape's command, the brackish water in the tub began to bubble, its hue deepening into the endless blue of the ocean. The soil in the basin glowed with renewed life, turning lush and green beneath their feet. O benevolent Lord of salvation, O God of wisdom, who scripts the cosmic drama that upholds the earth's foundations, in the name of Varaha, I summon you. Reunite with the world, rise again, and vanquish the foretold adversary in the 1,000-year war. As Snape's words echoed through the chamber, a dormant power stirred, awakened at last. Statuesque axes and chisels strapped to the arms of the 3rd incarnation of Vishnu bore fresh, jagged gashes. His pig-like visage, streaked with crimson, revealed razor-sharp fangs stained as though they'd pierced living flesh. Even the cobalt waters of the stone basin at his feet had run red. Around the basin's rim was carved an inscription: Earth Goddess, who upholds the world with her fangs, nurturer and giver of life. Without warning, the blood-tinted water churned. A column of soil rose in spiraling coils, coalescing into a single form. From the earthen plume emerged a woman of ample warmth and gentle strength, her eyes soft with a mother's calm. At that moment, Severus Snape's voice rang out, measured and clear. You long for the tender light of Mother Earth. You have donned the guise of a beast god, yet you resist returning to your true role as protector, thus defying Dharma itself. The four-armed, pig-headed figure stirred. He lifted his massive head, blinked through the blood-streaked fangs, and his eyes kindled with life and remembrance, as if some ancient yearning had been rekindled. A hush fell over the chamber. Then Snape's tone grew grave, echoing through the stillness. Behold the power that melts and reshapes all things, the generator, the maintainer, the melter. A sudden tremor coursed through the temple's foundation. Dust motes danced in the torchlight, and the very air crackled with anticipation. Shiva, the god of storms and lightning, the healer of disease, the lord of beasts and creatures, the patron of wisdom and generosity, master of song and sacrifice, hear my plea. Send down the Banaka, your mighty trident that binds the three realms, the natural world, the cultural world, the personal world, that governs belonging and non-belonging, and that unites the three bodies of flesh, mind, and memory. Strike once more at the physical form of Varaha, and restore me to my true origin. As Snape's final words echoed into the void, he knelt in solemn devotion. 1,000 miles away, Ryan's eyes narrowed, his pupils forming vertical slits like a hunting cat's. Then, with a crack that rent the very air, the ancient trident materialized, majestic, humming with the fury of thunder and lightning. It tore through the boundaries of space and plunged into the husk that once held the Tebow Warthog demon. In an instant, that corporeal shell and the faint aura it bore was obliterated, erased as though it had never existed. The trident's energy, now freed from form, streamed back into Snape, merging with his being. His final chant faded into silence. Wrapped in his billowing robes, Snape exhaled softly, and the ritual complete, drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. A flash of divine light filled the chamber. When it faded, a second Severus Snape stood where nothing had been moments before, looking utterly renewed. His hair was immaculately groomed, his complexion flawlessly pale, and the fifth plain black robe he wore now seemed to pulse with quiet power. His once tired obsidian eyes shone with fresh vitality. Below him, the original Snape, who had been lying unconscious, stirred and slowly opened his eyes. The two versions of the potions master exchanged a glance, then spoke in perfect unison. Incredible! By the master's blessing, we have become two bodies. The Snape who had risen first lifted a hand, and a polished hand mirror materialized in front of him. He studied his reflection with a mix of awe and disbelief, whispering, "Is this really me?" Chapter 258, The Beautiful World After Death. Severus Snape stood before the long, tarnished mirror in the empty corridor on Hogwarts' 3rd floor. His fingers trembled as he traced the outline of the face looking back at him. The bone structure was unmistakably his own, yet everything else felt foreign. The skin was fairer, the eyes softer, and even that once prominent nose had been subtly reshaped into something almost graceful. A mischievous whisper from his master echoed in his mind. You must adopt a healthy routine, watch your diet, strengthen your body. Snape had chalked it up to another eccentric command, never imagining it would transform him like this. If I'd looked like this from the start, Lily, he caught his breath and turned away. Beyond the door at the end of the hall, muffled voices drifted out. Inside, Lily Evans sat in a faded armchair, gently rocking the swaddled bundle in her arms. She glanced up at Professor McGonagall, who hovered nearby. Her usually stern expression softened, and her eyes rimmed with red. Robert is wonderful, Lily said, her voice warm with affection. He's always cooking for friends. His apple pie is one of a kind. Lately, he's even been asking James and me to show him new charms and spells. She smiled down at the sleeping child. And Mrs. McGonagall, you should see how proud Isabel is of her daughter. She's constantly asking all of us how Mei Ling's lessons are going. Professor McGonagall brushed a tear from her cheek. She's very fortunate, Lily. My father would never understand, Lily continued, gaze drifting toward the window. He's the minister at our local Presbyterian church, completely unaware that I'm a witch. Mother hid my true heritage from him all these years. The two women fell into a thoughtful silence, each lost in hopes and regrets, as the morning light filtered through the dusty panes. In that quiet moment, the wizarding world outside seemed both impossibly distant and achingly close, reminding them that every transformation, no matter how miraculous, carried its own price. Lily's voice was calm as she continued. My father was terrified that his newfound wizarding ties would wreck Mum's marriage prospects, but the moment I was born, he changed his tune, fully accepting both my mother and me. He even renounced his old faith and now spends his days at home pretending to be a proud wizard. Trust me, he won't trouble you. Harry felt his cheeks burn. He could almost hear himself shrivel up and vanish, just like Aberforth had stormed out moments before. Dumbledore must have noticed Harry's discomfort. His eyes danced with amusement, and he gave Harry a conspiratorial wink. The very mention of Lily's sister's happiness seemed to loosen something inside the headmaster. Gone was the austere, dignified air he'd always worn. In its place was a mischievous twinkle, like a kindly old man straight out of a children's story. Lily chuckled. Actually, about that. My father and his Calvinist friends were absolutely flabbergasted when I didn't ascend straight to heaven after, well, you know. Their shock lasted about 2 seconds. Then they saw God and Jesus themselves, right there in that other world. She grinned, sticking out her tongue playfully. Ever heard of Dougal MacGregor? Just then, Professor McGonagall cleared her throat and raised a hand. Albus, Harry, she said softly, motioning toward the door. Perhaps you two should step outside. Dumbledore remained where he was, one hand still gently clasping Harry's arm. McGonagall's lips twitched into a tired smile. I suppose, she added, you could say we're neighbors now. We all live on the far outskirts of Caithness County, deep in the Scottish Highlands. It really is that simple, Lily teased, a playful spark in her eyes. Except I hear your mother, Isabel, thinks he'd make the perfect husband for you. Professor McGonagall went pale. She thinks I should marry him? Lily feigned innocence. Who else would I mean? You know whom I mean, McGonagall snapped, her cheeks flaming as Harry and Dumbledore, standing behind her, exchanged amused glances. Has my mother always been so mischievous? McGonagall muttered under her breath. Seeing her distress, Lily held up her hands in apology. All right, I'll tell you what I've heard. You remember I was 21 when I died, on the night of October 31st, 1981, alongside James. Well, about 4 years after that, I overheard Isabel mention the name Elphinstone Elcott. Elphinstone Elcott? McGonagall repeated, puzzled. Lily nodded. Yes, he's more than 10 years older than you, and at one point he was actually your superior at the ministry. Then there's Dougal, your next-door neighbor. Isabel practically raised him from childhood. She claims that when Dougal proposed, you refused. You weren't willing to give up your magical career for marriage. McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line as she tried to process Lily's story. The Highland wind whispered through the pines outside, carrying with it the weight of unspoken possibilities and the persistent question of where her heart might truly lie. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore. So you're really going to bring up old Dougal again? He waited 2 years for me, and then I move on without so much as a note? Dumbledore feigned surprise, tapping his spoon against the china. My dear, if I'd known it would make you so cross. Don't flatter yourself, she interrupted. And for the record, Dougal wasn't my neighbor, though, yes, we both lived in the suburbs. My mother knew him from her childhood, but I only met him when I turned 18. He didn't pine away forever either. 2 years later, he married another farmer's daughter. Leaning back, Dumbledore steepled his fingers, a mischievous glint in his eye. I only wish to be fair. When Mr. McGregor announced his engagement, you wept buckets. You told me every detail. And did he stop writing? Not in the least. He sent letters to you through your mother, Isabel. McGonagall's cheeks flushed. So? You never answered, Dumbledore continued, still smiling. You slipped his letters under your bed without even opening them. She opened her mouth, but he held up a hand. And what of Elphinstone? He asked, shifting gears. He fancied you long before you set foot in the Ministry of Magic. McGonagall bristled. What's your point? Merely that your love life has always been more eventful than mere office intrigue, he said, popping a slice of melon into his mouth. She huffed, but a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. No matter how exasperating Albus could be, she'd never trade his company for all the quiet afternoons in the suburbs. He'd been asking me to marry him for decades, relentlessly so, until I finally said yes in 1982. By then we were both well past the age for children, so we never had any. His family was one of the oldest pure-blood lines in Britain, yet he insisted I keep my Muggle father's surname instead of taking his. In the wizarding world, that made him something of a laughingstock. My mother, Isabel, had actually known him in her lifetime, and they'd been friends. But when she died, everything changed between us. I couldn't understand why. Albus Dumbledore looked across at Professor McGonagall. And Lady Isabel, what did she really think of your husband? McGonagall hesitated, smoothing her robes. She was convinced he wasn't worthy of you, she admitted. In her eyes, a proper husband must be handsome, brilliant, and witty, qualities she felt only Dougal possessed. She thought Elcott could be a fine friend, but never husband material, too dull, not attractive enough. Robert, she said, at least met her standard of looks. McGonagall paused, then adjusted her spectacles, her expression puzzled. Your father? She echoed, as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd heard. Handsome, Lily echoed, an eyebrow arched. The word felt odd when applied to her father. She tapped her left hand thoughtfully. Ah, I see now. You've never seen Robert when he was young. In the afterlife, unless you choose to age, everyone remains youthful, even those more comfortable in an older form. But if you insist on that perfect, unchanging youth, especially when seeking a partner, you'll eventually grow weary of it. Remain young forever? Dumbledore's eyes narrowed as he seized on the phrase. He glanced at Harry, concern creasing his brow. Have I made a terrible mistake? Should you sever your bond with Riddle? I always thought that realm was beautiful, but I never realized its true cost. Immortality, there isn't a blessing, it's a curse. You'd watch friends, lovers, slip away, destined never to reunite. Albus, what are you suggesting? Professor McGonagall asked softly, her voice tense as understanding dawned. Has Mr. Potter's own immortality been tied to his connection with Professor Riddle? Harry. At the sound of his name, the relief that had flooded Lily's face since her resurrection drained away, replaced by a shadow of worry. She didn't even glance at Dumbledore. Instead, her attention drifted elsewhere, as if she'd just thought of another way. I spoke with Dumbledore, she said quietly. This sacrifice is unavoidable, yet magic is always evolving. Perhaps one day the barrier between their world and ours will be breached again. I've already done my part, though everything hinges on the resurrection stone. Harry lifted the smooth, inky black stone in his palm, a rush of relief flooding through him. At last, he had secured the artifact. Chapter 259. Demigod Wizard, God King. Harry held the jet-black stone aloft, its surface alive with an inner shimmer. Dumbledore, curiosity overcoming his restraint, leaned forward to scrutinize it. Before Lily had revealed what happened to Ariana, he had instinctively banished every memory of the resurrection stone, and even of Gettler, from his mind, fearing he would fall prey to its lure. Now approaching it purely as a scholar, he studied this artifact that defied life and death. It appears incomplete, he breathed, stepping closer. His slender fingers hovered over the faintly etched triangle and the hairline crack that split it. Almost of its own accord, a delicate ring of magic began to glow around those markings. Dumbledore closed his eyes, letting his fingertip brush the stone's surface, and in that instant, he caught a glimpse of something far deeper than metal or enchantment. A soft blue halo bloomed across the emblem and fracture. I saw Ariana, and my mother and father. The words escaped him in a trembling whisper, and an unseen force shoved him backward. He gasped and stumbled 2 paces away, as though banished by the stone itself. In Harry's palm, the black stone snapped shut, its cracks and symbols vanishing, leaving nothing but a smooth, ominous triangle once more. Professor McGonagall stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. Harry, too, seemed lost in another realm. The moment Dumbledore had used the resurrection stone in that uncanny way, Harry had appeared to merge with it, adrift in a swirl of luminous mist. He didn't return to himself until someone gently shook his shoulder. Lily paced the floor, her heart pounding. Tell me, what did they look like? And Ariana, what was she wearing? Dumbledore closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the vision. Ariana now looks grown. She wore a long, sky-blue gown, exquisitely simple and elegant, truly beautiful. A gown? Lily's excitement shifted to alarm. Is that wrong? Dumbledore regarded her curiously. Why do you ask, Lily? She bit her lip, struggling to find words. I I saw her like that once before, at the 1991 Hogwarts reunion, just before Harry used the stone to bring me back. She wore the exact same dress then. It was identical, right down to the embroidery. I know it's hard to believe. Professor McGonagall's brow furrowed as realization struck. She exchanged a meaningful glance with Dumbledore. "Are you suggesting," she whispered, "that Mr. Potter's resurrection stone can do more than merely call back the dead? It can really act like a phone to someone on the other side?" Minerva asked, her voice a mix of awe and skepticism. "If Lily's hunch is correct," he replied, "then yes. But it isn't that simple. I don't mean to boast, but the mysteries of the resurrection stone lie far beyond the grasp of ordinary wizards, even modern ones, by Dumbledore's reckoning. When I first studied it, I ran a few preliminary tests. What I discovered is this: the stone's power to raise the dead is missing a crucial element. Only a wizard of my strength, or someone with truly extraordinary talent, like Harry, can restore that missing piece, and only temporarily. Resurrection through the stone unfolds in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is communication. That's what I accomplished just now. I broke through the veil of mist and heard Ariana speak, then my parents. Phase 2 would be the actual summoning, drawing those spirits from the afterlife into a sort of limbo. That's the realm I've researched in the Department of Mysteries. Phase 3 is the final return to life, bringing the dead fully back to our world. At present, I can manage only the first step. No living wizard, no person, has the power to complete the second or third. So please, Professor McGonagall, don't expect miracles. I'm, after all, only a mere mortal. Albus Dumbledore's normally gentle eyes were darker than anyone had ever seen. He straightened behind his desk and spoke, every word measured and grave. "The god of death from the tale of the 3 brothers." He paused, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Your rank. How could I possibly summon Elphinstone? It seems impossible, yet I need the resurrection stone reactivated, if only one fragment of it." Professor McGonagall exchanged a terrified glance with Harry. Her lower lip trembled as she tried to speak. "Sir, it's too dangerous." Dumbledore turned and fixed his gaze on Harry. "Everything depends on you, Harry. That sudden surge of magic that cut off my link to that other realm, it came from you. I believe that, by coming back yourself, you have formed a unique bond with the stone." Harry swallowed. "When I looked into that world beyond death, I felt something slip inside me. I didn't know it was you guiding it. If I had, I would have fought it." A faint, almost sad smile curved Dumbledore's lips. "So you did see it. That confirms my theory. Resurrection follows 3 distinct stages." He held out a hand to Lily. "Lily, would you explain the process?" Lily stepped forward, her voice calm and clear. "There's no prohibition on discussing it. In fact, in ages past, it was an accepted, if feared, practice. You are correct. The resurrection stone itself cannot truly restore the dead. My own return to life adhered exactly to those 3 steps you have surmised. Between life and death lies a narrow threshold, and under the right circumstances, it can be crossed. I have corresponded with many of the so-called gods of that world, ancient sorcerers whom modern wizards worship as deities, and they all agree on one thing: magic has deteriorated horribly. In their era, wielding magic was instinctual. There was no chanting of spells. Even the energy-sapping rituals we now prize as ancient were child's play to them, mere beginner's drills. Today's wizards, lacking the raw power or innate talent of their forebears, resort to those long, elaborate incantations in a desperate bid to recapture what's been lost. I've debated this at length with numerous contemporary mages, and the consensus is unanimous. It all comes down to bloodline degeneration. That decay runs through every branch of magic. Only those rare individuals who forge their own unique path and push past their limits ever glimpse the heights that ancient wizards regarded as commonplace. Professor McGonagall frowned, clearly puzzled. "I'm not sure I follow," she said. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Lily perched on the edge of Dumbledore's oak desk, her emerald eyes dancing with mischief. "What I'm trying to say," she began, "is that to the ancient wizards, people of your caliber, modern sorcerers who've unlocked spiritual depths through their magical lineage, are essentially on par with their own mastery. They even gave this status a name: demigods." Dumbledore's silver mustache twitched in amusement. "Demigods? That sounds rather grandiose," she winked. So you're not just a human, after all. He chuckled and shook his head. If that's the case, then those so-called gods in our magical annals were simply wizards, too? And our greatest treasures, the Resurrection Stone, the Elder Wand, the Invisibility Cloak, were merely alchemical devices, much like the Pensieve I crafted? Just more advanced versions? Have we been losing ground instead of forging ahead? Lily folded her arms, leaning back to meet his gaze. Magic does progress, Albus. I've spoken directly with those ancient souls. Their power is innate, flowing through them from birth. That's why they're called gods. It's not about how deep or complex a spell is, but where its power originates. In the Middle Ages, we relied on lengthy incantations to mimic their feats. Over time, we stripped those chants down, refining and stabilizing them until they became the sleek, precise magic we practice today. Dumbledore tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. So our modern art is essentially a remastered echo of something far older, and at one time far more potent. Lily nodded. Exactly. We've inherited the legacy. We've just repackaged it to suit our era. Even within the ranks of demigod wizards, there lies a higher echelon, the ancient Wizza, Ardid. Those who achieve this exalted status earn the title of God King. Yet, no matter how mighty, even they share the same final destiny, returning to the kingdom of God in death. Special thanks to my classmate Duanmu Anran for the monthly ticket and to all readers for your recommendations and support. Chapter 260, The Sixth Dumbledore. Dumbledore's eyes flickered with curiosity. That other realm, is it really another kingdom of God? And what of those sorcerers who styled themselves as gods? Did they not establish their own divine domains? They lost, Lily replied, her voice trembling. The afterlife paradise exists only because those so-called gods were forced to sacrifice themselves. Few dare speak of that era, but one truth remains. Death ultimately claimed victory. She shivered at the memory. The conqueror was none other than the present god of death, an ancestor of the Potter line. Before he inherited that terrible office, he was no match for Cadmus Peverell, the second eldest among them. Yet once he ascended to divine power, he shattered every mythological hierarchy to forge his new realm. In that paradise of the afterlife, even the defeated dwell forever in comfort, so long as they remain free of sin. Dumbledore leaned back, his brow furrowed. If death stands unopposed, then who dares to check his power? He hadn't realized that the god of death had once nearly sacrificed his own humanity in the name of equality, and now the old Dark Lord trauma was stirring back to life inside him. He'd let Riddle continue to exist because he trusted Harry implicitly. In that same breath, he'd come to accept Harry's immortality, again only because of Riddle. Yet Lily's warning echoed in his mind. The god of death was an invincible being. In his worst imaginings, that power resembled the Dark Lord himself, someone who might one day choke off human progress or even threaten the world. For the first time, he found himself seriously considering ways to prolong his own life and delay the afterlife altogether. He had come to see wizards in three broad categories: modern, medieval, and those godlike figures of myth, and he and Riddle had already concluded that the so-called degeneration of wizarding bloodlines had nothing to do with Muggle marriages. Even his most steadfast allies, every pure-blood Dumbledore he knew, showed signs of decline in their family trees. Could this be another curse laid upon them by the god of death, the sole survivor of the Age of Gods? Of course, the god of death's influence was real. He had subtly shaped events through the Elder Wand, though at the time he'd paid no heed to its whispering power. He convinced himself that choosing a natural death didn't betray his principles. He was utterly exhausted and missed Ariana more than ever. Still, the Resurrection Stone offered him a chance to reach out to his lost family. With his current mana reserves, the link would hold for a full hour, so long as Harry didn't sever it. In that sense, there was more than one way to commune with the departed. Kate sat in the empty third-floor chamber with the others, bewildered by Dumbledore's sudden sermon on checks and balances. Even we, who bear a grudge against death, must acknowledge his greatness, he proclaimed. For millennia, he has shaped the afterlife into the just and peaceful realm we know today. No dynasty in history has endured so long. Judge a person not by his words, but by his deeds. Though Dumbledore himself never truly knew him, the very state of the afterlife reveals his character. Kate's eyes flashed. Since when did Dumbledore have the right to lecture them on cosmic equilibrium? In your reckoning, Ryan, she snapped, he's nothing but the sixth child. Hearing Kate disparage Dumbledore, Ryan couldn't suppress a grin. He felt more refreshed than if he'd gulped down a bowl of ice-cold mung bean soup on the hottest summer day. Silently, he paused time, allowed himself a private cheer, then let the world resume. He folded his arms and said evenly, deep down, he knows he doesn't deserve that kind of vilification. He simply misattributed the decline of wizarding bloodlines to the death god, and only realized later that death had been manipulating him through the Elder Wand. And while everything Lily's told us is undeniably true, he's still in the realm of the dead. Dumbledore can't be absolutely sure Lie's visions are genuine. It might all be a collective dream among the departed. Besides, the real afterlife can be far crueler than any illusion. Pinello, who'd stood quietly beside Fleur until now, let out a long sigh. Why is he so suspicious? You said he trusted Snape almost unconditionally. We all know Severus didn't start out as a double agent. He defected because of Lily's sacrifice, and Dumbledore accepted that. Why can't he extend the same trust to the Death God? Ryan shook his head. His confidence in Snape was earned through years of understanding, an understanding born of Snape's strength and wisdom. But with the Death God, Dumbledore has no real insight. He's only been misled and manipulated. Ryan had resolved to stay vigilant until he could meet death in person. A small, knowing smile curved his lips. In the boundless stretch of his future, perhaps he would finally see Albus Dumbledore truly alive and active in the real world once more. With Dumbledore at his side, Ryan could remain hidden, allowing the venerable wizard's wisdom and experience to guide the world toward a brighter path, while he himself simply enjoyed the spectacle. After all, a tranquil, uneventful afterlife would be far too dull for someone of Dumbledore's caliber. If events continued unfolding this way, maybe one day the great headmaster would sense Ryan's unseen influence. As an ardent fan of the Harry Potter books and films, Ryan relished the thought of that revelation. It would be a tale worth telling throughout his endless days. Kate, still reeling from her former idol's astonishing transformation, leaned forward eagerly. When is Snape arriving? Didn't he master some new magic? We need him here. He'll be here soon, Ryan replied calmly. He's somewhere in the castle right now, searching for us. No sooner had the words left his lips than a firm, rhythmic knock sounded on the door of the vacant classroom on Hogwarts' 3rd floor. The sound echoed down the deserted corridor, heralding an arrival that could change everything. May I come in? The door swung open on a hiss of cold air. Professor Snape stepped through, and even Dumbledore, lost in thought before the veil, started as if punched in the chest. Harry moved forward, placing himself between Snape and Lily. Merlin's knickers, Harry thought. Snape's been all buttoned up just for this moment. I like the man, but I really don't want to call him Dad. Lily softly set the sleeping Merlin into Harry's arms, undoing his makeshift blockade. She turned back to Snape, her brow furrowed. Severus? Great Merlin's beard. You're not pale? Your hair isn't greasy? Karen was lying. She must have thought you'd ruin my chances of marrying James. Snape's lip curled in annoyance. Karen? You remember, Karen Wentworth? The Gryffindor a year above me who died a few years back. Snape's eyes darkened. Of course I remember. She blew her own head off with that experimental curse. Harry shifted Merlin protectively in his arms, but Lily only peered at Snape with renewed curiosity. The awkwardness in the air was palpable, and none of them quite knew what would happen next. Severus Snape stopped just short of Lily Evans, his dark eyes unreadable. You're the wizard everyone's talking about, splashed all over the front page of the Daily Prophet, he said quietly. How could I forget? He took another step forward, halting only when a firm hand on his arm made him pause. Professor Dumbledore had stepped between them, his pale blue eyes grave beneath his half-moon spectacles. Severus, Dumbledore began softly, I won't ask how you discovered Lily's return to life before any of us did, but you must speak the truth. Then, as if indulging a private amusement, the headmaster's lips curved into a mischievous smile, something no one had ever seen before. He turned to Lily and added, still grinning, and though she meant it as an insult, Karen did have a point. Severus does have a sallow complexion, perpetually greasy hair, and that hooked nose of his. It's hardly surprising the students whisper behind his back and call him the old bat. A hush fell over the courtyard as Lily glanced from Dumbledore to Snape and back again, the tension between them as palpable as the late afternoon sun. Chapter 261, I'm Not a Good Man. Severus Snape's eyes never left Lily Evans. Every idle whisper about him, no matter how petty, felt like a personal affront. He barely registered Dumbledore's voice until that crooked nose and sly grin elbowed their way into his sight. Is there something wrong, Severus? Albus Dumbledore asked, feigning innocence as he casually waved a hand. Did I say something amiss? At the edge of the room, Harry Potter leaned in and murmured, I swear, he looks like he broke his nose in a duel when he was younger. Are we even sure that's the real Dumbledore? Not Ron, disguised with polyjuice. Snape's lips curved into a scornful arc. He turned back to Dumbledore, his voice dripping with contempt. Oh, dear Albus, when did you become so obsessed with your staff's choice of robes and the nicknames you bestow upon them? If you're looking for something to occupy your time, perhaps you should check on that dear friend of yours lurking at the bottom of the Black Lake. You two are closer than anyone could imagine. After all, she's the mother of your child. She might appreciate a bit of your personal concern far more than Professor Sprout's new hat. He let the words hang in the air, then swept past Dumbledore, his gaze snapping back to Lily's soft profile. Nothing, no petty jibe, and certainly no flattery from the headmaster, could draw his attention away from her. Behind him, Dumbledore's lips tightened, and Harry exchanged a guilty look with Ron, who was desperately trying not to sneeze in his hastily brewed polyjuice form. But Snape, lost in admiration and untroubled by his own barbed tongue, found only Lily's face in his thoughts, and nothing, not even his own self-confessed failings, could tear him away. Severus bit his lip, then brusquely shoved the astonished Albus aside. Would you please stop interrupting Lily and me while we're reminiscing? Caught off guard, both Harry and Professor McGonagall thought in unison, Oh no, he really just said that. Across the table, Lily's eyes lit up at the mention of me, and before Severus could stop her, she slipped past him and nudged Dumbledore with a playful elbow. Her? She repeated, eyebrows arched. Severus gaped. When had the venerable headmaster ever shown an interest in women? He recalled Candela, Lily's ever-honest older sister, complaining on more than one tipsy evening, Why do my children always end up playing with boys? Yet hearing Lily voice it so directly still felt like a jolt. Dumbledore blushed scarlet, as though he wished the floor would open swallow him whole. I really can't say, he stammered. Albus Dumbledore, over 100 years old, am I secretly chugging some anti-aging potion again? The elixir of life? Sir Nicholas's recipe? But I thought I destroyed every last vial ages ago. As Lily laughed and teased her old friend, Dumbledore leaned closer to Harry and murmured so softly only the boy could hear, Harry, could I borrow the resurrection stone for a moment? Harry barely had time to nod before Dumbledore scooped up Professor McGonagall, who'd been leisurely eating melon, snatched up the resurrection stone, and vanished in a sudden gust of wind. His parting words drifted back to them. Lily, I'm off. I need to help Minerva contact her husband. When the breeze died away, only Harry, Lily, Severus, and the baby Mai Ling remained. Mei Ling sat snug in Harry's arms, her round eyes taking in every detail of the room, utterly innocent and unperturbed. Lily's brow furrowed, and she puckered her lips in a way that made her look less like a queen than a perturbed schoolgirl. Why did Dumbledore just leave like that? She demanded. Severus cleared his throat, his usual clipped confidence softening into something almost hesitant. If you'd like, I can go after him, he offered, voice low. Lily laughed, a clear, bell-like sound, but her gaze never wavered from Severus. Fetch him back, you say? Her smile held a challenge. Harry shifted Mei Ling nervously, itching to cough or pinch her gently, just to shatter the sudden tension. At last, Lily leaned forward, her eyes bright with determination. Tell me, Severus, is what Dumbledore said true? Lily found Severus Slughorn, no, Severus Snape, seated alone on a low windowsill in an abandoned wing of the castle. Harry was off in the distance, chasing floating motes of light that danced between the stained glass panels. Taking a steadying breath, Lily approached him. Severus, she said softly, did you really know I'd been resurrected before anyone else? Snape's dark eyes flickered with surprise, then hardened. Yes. Lily raised an eyebrow. And was Dumbledore right about your appearance? That you'd grown hook-nosed and sallow? Snape's mouth snapped shut. He sighed. Yes, unfortunately, I did. She couldn't help but grin. I've also noticed your hair is always greasy. Why the perpetual sheen? You certainly weren't like that at Hogwarts. And what's with those trousers? My trousers are perfectly clean. Snape shot back, brushing invisible dust off his knee. And as for my hair, try finding a wizarding shampoo that isn't owned by the Potter family or one of their subsidiaries. It's impossible. Lily nodded, amused. All right, but if you knew about my return, why have you been so kind to Harry? Snape's gaze dropped to the floor. He's your son. Lily cocked her head. True, but you're the one who knew I'd be brought back early. I'm not worried you'll betray me. Something in her gentle tone seemed to unnerve him. Snape's words came in a rush. You know what? I'm no angel. When Harry first came to school, I did everything I could to make his life miserable. Lily held up a hand. That's only natural. Harry and James share so many traits. As she reached down to ruffle her son's hair, Snape visibly deflated. He shook his head, voice barely above a whisper. That's not normal. Harry laughed at some private joke and scampered back to his mother's side. Lily glanced at Snape, his face more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it, and offered him a small, understanding smile. In that moment, old enmities flickered and died away, leaving only cautious hope in their place. I'm only making things difficult for Neville, Snape snapped, his voice sharp. He's furious that Voldemort chose you, over him, over his family. Lily's eyes narrowed. That's typical of you, Severus, keeping every scrap of information to yourself. You don't see that the dark mark on Harry is more than a curse. It's an opportunity. In the afterlife, how many ambitious souls would trade everything for a chance like this? Snape closed his eyes as if bracing himself. All right, then, what if I also admit that I overheard the full prophecy and told Voldemort about it? Would you still think me a good man? Before Lily could answer, the door swung open and Albus Dumbledore slipped inside. He looked as though he might dart away at any moment. Severus never heard the entire prophecy, the headmaster said quietly. He didn't know it named Harry until after Voldemort had marked him. Only then did he risk his life to find me. Snape whirled on Dumbledore. Get out! You're not needed here. With a flash, the headmaster was gone. Lily stared at the closed door, baffled. He risked his life, she repeated, her voice soft. Severus Snape's eyes lit up triumphantly, as though he'd uncovered the final piece of a puzzle. Aha! So you don't believe a word in the Daily Prophet. Yes, I was a terrible student. I even flirted with the Death Eaters, hoped to join their ranks and make my name. Harry braced himself, expecting Lily to explode. Instead, she merely tapped her chin in thought. Come to think of it, she said softly, that night, Voldemort never meant to kill me. He told me to leave, then I got in his way and ended up destroying him. So Severus, when you learned Voldemort had targeted my family, you ran to Dumbledore and became a spy. You even begged Voldemort to spare my life? Snape's composure wavered. How dare you say that? I killed your family. Lily shook her head gently. No, Severus. It was your own betrayal that set everything in motion. Because of you, Voldemort learned where we lived and cast the Fidelius charm to protect our home, believing it foolproof. But James panicked and named Sirius, not Dumbledore, as secret keeper. If Dumbledore had been in charge, nothing could have gone wrong. Then Sirius, in his own confusion, switched the secret keeper again, without even telling Dumbledore. She paused, letting the truth hang in the air. Her gaze never wavered from Snape's. That's how the prophecy reached him, she whispered. All at once, Harry saw it clearly, the tangled loyalties, the missteps born of fear, and the moment when everything changed. Peter was chosen to be the secret keeper. After all, his mother wasn't under official protection, and he tended to be a bit timid once he stepped beyond home. That's why they picked him. So don't blame yourself, Sever. And a special thanks to Wolf King for the monthly ticket, and to all my classmates for the likes, recommendations, and subscriptions. Chapter 262, The Unchanging Guardian. Chapter 734, The Unchanging Patronus. Professor Snape's voice trembled with fury. These are nothing but excuses. If it weren't for me, Voldemort would never have set his sights on you in the first place. The figure opposite him stood in the dim light, unshaken. Actually, he said quietly. He would have. We've already slipped through his grasp 3 times. As long as we remain in the Order of the Phoenix, he'll come after us sooner or later, and today just happened to arrive early. I can't divulge every detail of the prophecy, but trust me, I know more about it than you do. Even without your interference, Voldemort would have learned of it through higher powers. Snape's lips curled into a bitter smile as he recited his own confession. I slaughtered muggles, half-bloods. I'm a murderer. He let the words hang in the stale air, as though embracing the dark identity they conferred. Then a calm, unmistakable voice rang out, from nowhere and everywhere at once, coldly cutting through the tension. He's lying, Albus Dumbledore said, his tone grave. If he had truly committed such atrocities, I would never accept his surrender, even if he came to me on his knees. He is no penitent. He is an opportunist, much like Lucius Malfoy. Lucius serves Voldemort out of greed and family ties. Severus, you were spared the usual Death Eater initiation, killing muggles, only because your skill in potion-making made you indispensable. Albus Dumbledore, be silent! Snape's voice broke as he staggered. Fury, fear, and disbelief warred behind his eyes, and then, drained of all strength, he crumpled to the cold stone floor. Lily sighed, her green eyes never leaving Severus's face. Even if Albus didn't spell it out, I know the truth. I've been watching you ever since you slipped into the Death Eaters. I tracked down every victim across Britain. I visited their families, learned their names. You can't hide from me. Severus's shoulders twitched. So there's no chance I could just slip away, go abroad? He asked, a faint hope in his voice. Sk. What a pity, Severus, came Dumbledore's voice, disembodied yet unmistakable. You've never set foot outside Britain, have you? And one more thing. Your Patronus is a doe. It always has been. On the other side of the room, Kate leaned forward, folding her arms. I'm not sure what magic you taught him, Dumbledore, but Severus has made himself so clean-cut and upbeat. It's obvious he's trying to, well, as Ryan said, play the thief. The moment he first appeared, he couldn't hide that impulse. Even Harry noticed it. So why, of all things, is Severus so determined to ruin his image in front of Harry's mother? Ryan let out an exasperated sigh. A loser's always a loser. If it were James Potter in Severus's shoes, he wouldn't bother clearing up any misunderstandings. He'd swagger in, charm Lily properly, and everything would fall into place. But Snape, he's never been that sort of man. But for him, love was the only pure thing, even more precious than life itself. Before he ever laid eyes on Lily, he might have imagined stepping into Harry's shoes, becoming his father. But the moment he truly faced her, all he could feel was remorse. He carried a deep-seated inferiority complex, convinced that a former Death Eater who had killed Lily in a past life had no right to claim her heart. To win her, he resorted to falsehoods, so many that even Dumbledore, ready to scoff at his plight, rose in his defense. Had Dumbledore stayed silent, Severus would have piled on fresh sins, from manipulating Harry's childhood to any other desperate measure. Penelope watched him with conflicted eyes. Yes, his conviction was moving, but in an even fight, Snape would always lose. James Potter held himself to the highest moral standards, yet in the battle for Lily's love, he fought with every weapon at his disposal, no matter how unscrupulous. And Lily, she understood better than anyone. Through her marriage to James and the 7 years they spent together in the afterlife, she bore witness to the depth of true devotion, the sacrifices it demanded, and the ruthless lengths some men would go to claim her affection. She had long since seen through James's courtship, however charming it appeared. On the surface, he seemed honorable, always ready to stand up for the downtrodden, never bullying anyone, at least after 5th year, friendly to nearly everyone, save the Slytherins, and possessing every quality one might hope for in a husband or lifelong friend. In contrast, Severus Snape, when Lily first met him, had been proud, impatient with muggles and muggle-borns, Lily aside, curmudgeonly about neatness, and fascinated by the dark arts. Yet it was James she chose, not Severus. She'd convinced herself at the time that James's willingness to reinvent himself for her was proof of his devotion. Severus, despite her clear discomfort around his unsavory friends, had plunged headlong into Death Eater circles without a second thought. James, so the story went, had cast off his old arrogance, dropped his prankster ways, even curbed his teasing, at least in public, just to win Lily's favor. That was why, by 7th year, she agreed to date him, and only months later, they were married. Now she realized it had all been an act. James had never truly changed. He'd simply toned down his worst habits when Lily was nearby, knowing exactly how to curry her sympathy. Behind closed doors, he still mocked his friends, tormented Severus, and reveled in the very behavior he pretended to have outgrown. By playing the hero in Lily's eyes and casting Severus as the villain, James had trapped her devotion. It was a perfect deception, one she now understood all too clearly. Lily felt something shift deep inside her. At this moment, James and Snape were equals in her heart. James was still her husband and Harry's father, of course, but after 7 years of marriage, their passionate love had settled into a quiet, familial affection. The daily spark, the oil and spices of romance, had long faded. In its place, James's little irritations had begun to wear on her nerves. And then there was Severus, her childhood friend turned protector, the man who'd once loved her more fiercely than anyone else, and who, after all these years and heartbreak, had genuinely changed for her. That didn't mean she had to leave James, but Lily caught herself wondering why she shouldn't allow her heart some new freedom. "May I see your Patronus?" she asked softly, as if the rest of the world had vanished. Her cheeks pinked, and she took a hesitant step towards Snape, betraying how deeply moved she was. Snape met her gaze with an unfamiliar gentleness. "You want to see it?" he murmured, drawing his wand. "Expecto Patronus." A shimmering silver doe burst from his wand's tip. It vaulted across the room, paused at the open window, then slipped into the night sky. Lily watched the silver light of the Patronus dissolve into the night air, tears gathering in her eyes. "It's still like this after all this time?" she whispered. Snape gave a wry shrug. "It's always been like this." Instead of vanishing, his doe Patronus swept through the open window, its silvery form gliding down the corridor and slipping into an empty classroom on the 3rd floor. There, on a small wooden table, sat the counterfeit Philosopher's Stone, a dark, glassy orb that functioned like a resurrection stone and projected a live feed across the room. Around it stood Dumbledore, McGonagall, Sprout, Lupin, and Hagrid, their faces lit by the pale glow of the stone's magic. McGonagall leaned close to Sprout and murmured, "I'm sorry, James, but I wager 1 galleon they'll share a kiss in 10 minutes. At her words, Sirius clenched his fists, ready to storm forward and interrupt, but Hagrid's huge hand gripped his shoulder firmly, holding him back. Silence fell as the Patronus, they both knew too well, hovered just beyond the door, shimmering with unspoken longing. At that moment, every eye in the room snapped toward the door as a silver doe bounded inside. Its ethereal light washed over the students' faces, and a hush fell across the classroom. Harry's heart hammered in his chest. The shape was unmistakable, a doe's Patronus. In the original tale, Severus Snape's Patronus was always a doe, a detail first revealed during Harry's 6th year at Hogwarts. I may have hinted at that earlier in this retelling, though I can't quite recall, but for clarity's sake, let us agree that Harry and his friends already know this truth. What the books never told us is whether Snape's Patronus ever struck down an opponent. Only Albus Dumbledore was said to have a killing Patronus, and there's no canonical evidence that Snape's duo has ever harmed anyone. For the purposes of our story, we'll assume it remains a purely protective guardian, appearing only to guide and defend. Chapter 735, Honest Grindelwald. The Patronus charm stands as the ultimate manifestation of a wizard's brightest, most protective emotions, a powerful ward against dark magic and sinister creatures. Yet for all its potency, it remains one of the most intricate and demanding spells in existence. Countless gifted witches and wizards have struggled to produce even a faint silvery wisp, let alone summon a fully corporeal Patronus. Of those rare few who master its physical form, most yield to the familiar: stags, otters, hares, or other ordinary creatures. Truly extraordinary Patronuses, those taking the shape of legendary or magical beasts, are nearly unheard of. Albus Dumbledore's resplendent Phoenix Patronus is famed throughout the wizarding world. Tales also speak of a Thestral Patronus sighted once, and of another wizard's fiery dragon, though their identities remain a mystery. Even more extraordinary are Patronuses in the form of extinct animals. Hedley Fleetwood, for example, famously conjured a majestic mammoth. and only one wizard in recorded history, known as the Invincible Andros, could summon a Patronus of gargantuan proportions, a being so vast it rivaled small dragons in size. Yet among living wizards, none has penetrated the depths of the charm's secrets quite like Albus Dumbledore. He alone can call forth a fully corporeal Patronus that lives and breathes as a magical creature. His mastery extends further still. Dumbledore can use his Patronus as a secure messenger, sending it across continents to carry his words and speak in his own voice. In his hands, the Patronus charm becomes more than a shield. It becomes a bridge of communication, as steadfast and radiant as the emotions that fuel it. The Patronus charm was a secret known only to members of the Order of the Phoenix, prized for the security it provided. A wizard's Patronus takes on a shape that mirrors their innermost character and positive emotions, making it impossible to imitate, and it's a powerful bulwark against the dark arts. Naturally, Severus Snape, as one of the Order's own, would have mastered it long ago. In that very moment, with every eye in the room fixed on him, Sirius Black dissolved into shadow and reformed as a gargantuan black dog, nearly 10 feet from nose to tail, fangs bared and saliva dripping. It lunged toward the shimmering silver stag that pranced protectively in midair. Then, cutting through the hall's sudden tension, came Snape's voice, cold, measured, and undeniably the voice of that silver deer. I find myself reflecting on my modest contributions to this school's safety, the Patronus intoned slowly. Therefore, Albus, I formally submit a proposal. We must prohibit certain animals from entering Hogwarts. Specifically, oversized dogs that, at first glance, resemble rabid beasts, such as the hulking creature in front of me, whose dripping jaws present a rather unsavory hazard. At the final syllable, the massive hound blinked, shook its head, and vanished. In its place stood Sirius Black, arms folded and hackles rising. "You snot-nosed git," he snarled, glaring at Snape as the echoes of his Patronus faded into silence. Sirius's silver stag crouched low, steam drifting from his flanks as he glared back over his shoulder. "Mind your tongue, Severus," he snorted. "Can't your dour brain stand a little daylight?" He shook his head, antlers gleaming. "Unlike someone closed-minded enough to ignore the facts, I'm clearly an animagus. I shifted into this form just to shake off Hagrid trailing right behind me. Even he can see who's at a disadvantage here, me or you." A proud gleam flitted in his amber eyes. "He's probably terrified I'll tear you to bits, isn't he, snot-nose?" Sirius let out a cruel chuckle. "What, are you quaking in your boots?" The next moment, the stag froze. A calm, cold voice drifted from just behind them. "You fool, think before you speak." Sirius's heart pounded. "You're conveniently standing in the very same room, up on the 3rd floor. All I had to do was turn the handle, step around the corner, and here I am." With a sudden flash of silver light, the stag vanished in a curling swirl of mist. The door creaked open, and Lily Evans stepped in. Even in the dim corridor lamps, she looked every bit 17, bright-eyed, determined. Her gaze flicked to a ghostly projection in the air, a slender beam of red light shooting outward like a firework. She pressed her lips together, then declared, "Severus was right." Lily's eyes flashed with anger. "I thought you were going to change the subject," she said, voice shaking. "But this, how dare you spy on us?" At her words, everyone in the room took an involuntary step back. Everyone, that is, except Sirius, whose expression blazed with fury. In front of Albus Dumbledore, now miraculously shrunken to the size of a 6-year-old, hovered the small, glowing red stone. With a lazy flick of his tiny wand, Dumbledore banished the flickering image from the crystal and let the orb drift back into his hand. Dumbledore looked entirely unruffled. "On the contrary, Lily," he said, voice calm and warm, "I only did this to protect your precious reunion with Severus. They arrived insisting on a private audience, and I suspected Severus might go to extreme lengths to see you again. After all, it's been more than 10 years. I merely provided a quiet space where you two could talk uninterrupted. Frankly, you should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" A low, cold voice cut in, and Severus Snape stepped from the shadows behind Lily. His eyes were hard, his cheeks pale with fury. "Since when do you revel in your own victories like a boastful Slytherin? Oh wait, perhaps it's because you're finally old enough to have children of your own." Before Sirius could leap in, yelling, "Shut up, you!" Professor Sprout's tinkling laughter filled the air. "Oh my," she said, stepping forward with a grin. "I haven't seen you two sparring like this in ages. What a delight! Minerva, I win. Hand over that galleon." Pomona Sprout threw her head back in laughter, waving the gold coin like a trophy. Professor McGonagall's stern features softened, her usual reserve giving way to delight. "Pomona, must you gloat so loudly?" McGonagall chided, though the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her amusement. "At least wait until after we discuss the real news. I want every juicy detail about Albus's children, and I'm betting Professor Snape, who brewed that miraculous elixir and all its follow-up tonics, has the best insider information of all." The idea of Professor Snape as Potions Master confidant seemed to thrill McGonagall as much as a last-ditch Quidditch victory over Slytherin. She leaned forward, anticipation shining in her gaze. Snape, however, only cleared his throat and fell silent. He already knew the terms of the bet and preferred to let the whispering swirl around him rather than draw more attention. Nearby, Sirius Black shot Pomona and McGonagall a worried look. He didn't need another scandal widening the rift between Snape and Lily. Nor did Harry need any more confusion about who his real father might be. At the mention of his children, Albus Dumbledore, a sixth-generation son himself, shrunk back into the gathering, determined to remain inconspicuous. Harry Potter, cheeks burning, wished he could vanish completely. The moral outrage of his friends made him feel every bit as guilty as if he'd been caught snooping. Rubeus Hagrid was the picture of penitence. His small, beetle-black eyes tracked the floorboards as if seeking forgiveness there. Only Lily Evans remained refreshingly unruffled. With a small, knowing smile, she raised her eyebrows and addressed the group. "Before we go any further, have any of you decided who you think the mother is?" She paused, her expression equal parts challenge and invitation, daring them to answer. Professor Snape shot Lily a sharp look. "So after listening to Professor McGonagall, you claim to know the most? Or are you just trying to divert us?" McGonagall rose from her chair, adjusted her spectacles, and fixed Lily with a skeptical gaze. "You really haven't heard? The so-called transgendi, our fertility potion, is all the rage in that other world, but the stories barely reached our ears. It's actually an ancient recipe, lost for centuries, and you of all people should know how fond my mother is of Dougal's work." Lily's eyes fluttered, a sudden realization igniting in her mind. Could it be? That's exactly it. Professor Sprout sprang to her feet. "But when did this happen? Isn't Dougal locked up in Azkaban?" Lily stared at her colleagues, utterly bewildered. At that moment, Albus Dumbledore leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. "It seems he hasn't lied to you after all." Snape frowned. "What on earth are you two talking about?" Lily took a breath, recalling a promise long past. He swore that when he returned, his inner circle would consist solely of devoted Death Eaters, and that he wouldn't kill a single soul who wasn't one of Voldemort's followers. Dumbledore's eyes shone with gentle warmth as he nodded. "Precisely. Chapter 736. Lily, am I my sister?" Dumbledore sat rigidly in the dimly lit room, still lost in the echoes of Grindelwald's final memories. The silence was so complete that no one dared break it. Our breaths came in quiet, cautious whispers. Finally, Lily spoke. "But weren't those followers already dead?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "My mother, she's obsessed with contacting wizards from the other world." Harry pushed himself to his feet. He desperately wanted to steer the conversation back to the real reason we were all here, Professor Snape and his mother. But Lily turned on him, her eyes blazing. "Sinful souls must first endure punishment, then sincerely repent and acknowledge their mistakes before they're allowed into that world," she snapped. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. "Guilty? Who decrees that verdict? The god of death? By what measure do you judge innocence or guilt?" Lily met him without flinching. "It's not the whim of one deity," she said. "All souls in the afterlife agreed upon it. They set aside religious, racial, and national prejudices and rely only on a simple, but admittedly imperfect understanding of good and evil shared by all sentient life. Beyond that principle, I'm afraid I cannot say more." Chapter 7. Secrets of the Covenanted Sleep. The long oak table in Dumbledore's office was strewn with parchment and curious artifacts. Lily stared at the swirling runes on an ancient map, her expression tinged with regret. "I can't obscure it," she said quietly. "I must be honest about everything." Harry leaned forward, brow furrowed. A magical contract? He asked, recalling tales of the Atlantean Covenant. Lily nodded. Exactly that. In its original world, anyone who refuses to relinquish life falls into an enchanted slumber, frozen in youth indefinitely. If you know the rules and accept them, you live on, untouched by age. But ignorance gives you no choice. You sleep until the magic decides otherwise. She paused, choosing her words. For an innocent soul, one who neither understands the bargain nor has committed any sin, this fate is far kinder than knowing every stipulation and then hiding in fear, avoiding the contract out of dread or desire. Dumbledore steepled his fingers, studying Lily thoughtfully. Such a covenant defies our usual understanding of death and rebirth, he murmured. It suggests powers beyond even the four founders, and perhaps even the gods themselves. Before he could say more, Severus Snape slammed his fist on the table. Enough of this speculation. His dark eyes flashed. Albus, you grow arrogant, believing your wisdom rivals all the sages of every realm. If Lily harbored any doubt about this contract, she would have spoken up. Instead, we have a greater concern, concealing her return. He turned on Dumbledore. We cannot let anyone know she's been resurrected. It's far too dangerous. One whisper, and every dark creature, every indifferent soul, will converge on us. Dumbledore's calm mask flickered. Severus, our duty is to protect her, and the world at large. We must weigh the risk of secrecy against the necessity of truth. Snape sneered. Truth. We are the Order of the Phoenix, Albus. The British wizarding world relies on us. Why should we pander to those who dwell in shadows? Harry rose abruptly. Enough, both of you, he demanded. We safeguard Lily. We find her a new identity, and we decide together when and if the world learns the truth. Lily met Harry's gaze, and with a small, determined nod, closed the discussion. The candlelight danced on the map as they prepared for the trials ahead, united, for now, in silence and secrecy. Severus leaned forward, voice low and steady. I don't see the point in hiding Lily's protection in secret. Wouldn't it be more effective to announce it outright? Sirius's eyes narrowed to slits. Announce it? So you can wander that much closer to Lily? Don't forget, she's James's wife now, a married woman. Severus snapped back. You fool. Lily's safety matters more than propriety. I thought you'd finally own up, but you're still the same self-important prankster who, over 10 years ago, promised James Potter you wouldn't make me secret keeper, then changed it on him in some underhanded trick. Sirius's pride flared. With a harsh curse on his lips, he whipped out his wand. Severus tensed, but before the duel could begin, a gentle voice intervened. Enough, Sirius. Albus Dumbledore stood from his armchair, wand in hand. A slender chain of silver light snaked through the air and coiled itself around Sirius, binding him so tightly he couldn't move or speak. Sirius's wand arm froze mid-swipe. Even his furious glare could not break the charm. Severus closed his eyes for a moment, pain and regret flickering across his face. When he dared glance again, Dumbledore's calm gaze met his. Severus is right, Dumbledore said quietly. Lily Potter needs a new identity, one so complete that no enemy can find her, and only those we absolutely trust may know the truth of the Potter household. Beyond that circle, we reveal nothing of what lies beyond death. The afterlife is a wondrous thing, so wondrous in fact that anyone who truly comprehends it might forsake the world of the living. He let the words hang in the hush that followed. Sirius glowered at the glittering bonds. Severus clenched his fists, and Dumbledore, as ever, held the room in a single unspoken promise. They would protect Lily at any cost. Professor Minerva McGonagall inclined her head. I know exactly what you're feeling. When I used the resurrection stone to speak with Ayrton and my parents, the pull to join them was almost unbearable. I saw them so vividly, alive and well in another realm, and holding the stone feels like holding a one-way ticket. It takes every ounce of willpower not to use it right now. Pomona Sprout gave her a sympathetic smile. Minerva, I'm with you. I won't be calling my mom and dad yet, not while there's still work left for me here. Let's save that decision for when our time truly comes. And honestly, I'd rather avoid any matchmaking schemes my mother might cook up. Remus Lupin's voice cracked. My parents never truly believed in me, until after they were gone. All they knew was that I was the shy boy at Hogwarts with a handful of friends. I spent my life worrying I'd never hold a steady job or find someone to share it with. I'd give anything to tell them I've finally found both. Hagrid, towering over them all, dabbed at his eyes. I'm right there with you, Remus. My dad worried about me every hour of every day. I've got so much I want to say, about Oli and about how happy I've become. But I suppose I must wait my turn. Professor McGonagall, when the time is right, I'll be asking you to use the stone for me too. Olim and I have an appointment with the giant in a few days, Lily said. After that, we'll look for my mother, if she's still alive. She turned to Severus. What about you, Sev? Her voice dropped to a whisper, and she slipped her hand into his. Sirius, still bound to his chair, watched with hungry approval, as though he could burst into triumphant cheers at any moment. Snape stiffened as if struck by a stunning spell, thrusting his hands into his pockets. A faint pink flush betrayed him. He glanced away, voice low and distant. Me? My parents never wanted me. I was just a trophy in their warped affection. I wouldn't wish them the paradise they claimed existed beyond death. Heaven, as I mockingly call it. They had no shortage of darkness, and I inherited every last bit. Severus, Lily began, tightening her hold on his arm. Harry seized the moment, stepping between them. Sirius's eyes glittered. If he could speak, he'd have roared, "Well done, Harry!" Albus Dumbledore clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention. Don't forget that Harry is the true master of the Resurrection Stone. I've only borrowed it for now. And if any of you wish to claim it, Harry won't refuse. Just like before, I borrowed the dossier and asked Professor McGonagall to contact Mr. Elphinstone. Excellent, Snape replied. He turned to Harry. Just let me know when you're ready to move forward. Of course, Professor, Harry said quickly, relief evident in his voice. Snape cleared his throat, cheeks tinged pink. There is one more thing, Lily's lineage. Everyone knows Lily throughout the wizarding world, and Dudley even has a small reputation thanks to that first-grade incident. But their parents? Despite Lily's renown and yours, Harry, no witch or wizard gives them a second thought. And Lily's own parents have passed on. All the same, we can still record a third child under their names. Lily looked thoughtful, nibbling at her thumbnail. So, does that mean I'll officially become my own sister? She glanced at Snape. If Petunia remains listed as my sister Severus, isn't there some way to make me a higher generation relative above Petunia? Snape met her gaze evenly. I'll explore the possibilities. Rest assured, Lily, we'll find the best way to preserve both your identities.